Welcome, friend, to another journey together. We're so glad to have you here. Tonight, we will explore a selection of forgotten teachings from masters of old, keys that unlock the door to profound calm and restorative sleep. If you'd like, feel free to share what time it is and where you are listening from. We will be sharing a rare collection of heart-opening Zen tales and reflect on the wisdom contained within them. Each teaching whispers a deep truth, designed to gently shift your perception of worry, restlessness, and the endless search for something more. These are not simple tales. They are living teachings passed down through generations by those who mastered the art of inner peace. They reveal a truth many of us have lost: that genuine peace is not a destination to be reached, but a way of being that can be awakened within. Tonight, you will feel the truth of these words settle deep within you. As these ancient stories unfold, you may sense a subtle transformation unfold within you. The sharp edges of the day will begin to soften. The relentless current of your thoughts will slow to a gentle stream. Without any effort, you may find yourself drifting into a state of deep clarity and profound rest. So allow yourself to settle in now. Let go of the day and feel your body grow heavy with relaxation. Take one slow, easy breath in. And as you release it, give yourself permission to receive these timeless insights, teachings that have a way of finding us exactly when we need them most. Let us begin with a story about finding wisdom in the simplest of actions. In the mountains surrounding an ancient monastery, autumn arrived with magnificent splendor. The great ginkgo tree that stood in the central courtyard became the pride of the temple, its countless fan-shaped leaves transforming into brilliant gold. Pilgrims would journey from distant villages just to witness this annual miracle, when the tree appeared to burn with celestial fire. A young monk, recently ordained and eager to demonstrate his understanding, noticed the elderly abbot sweeping beneath the tree each morning. Golden leaves drifted down constantly, covering the paths almost as quickly as they were cleared. The young monk approached his teacher with what he believed was an astute observation. "Master," he said, gesturing towards the falling leaves, "why do you sweep when the wind will only bring down more leaves? Surely this is wasted effort." The abbot continued his rhythmic sweeping, his weathered hands moving the broom with practiced grace. He offered only a gentle smile in response, saying nothing. The young monk felt certain his teacher simply hadn't grasped the futility he'd pointed out. A week later, a fierce storm arrived in the darkness before dawn. The wind howled through the mountains with unprecedented fury. When the monks emerged from their quarters the next morning, they discovered heartbreak. Every single golden leaf had been stripped from the ginkgo's branches, leaving them bare and skeletal against the grey sky. The entire courtyard lay buried beneath a thick, sodden carpet of gold. The beauty they had cherished was gone. The seasonal splendor had ended abruptly. Many monks stood in stunned silence, feeling the weight of impermanence settle heavily upon them. But there was the old abbot, broom in hand, already at work. He was not gathering the leaves for disposal, nor was he trying to restore the courtyard to its previous state. Instead, he swept gentle pathways through the golden carpet. A path to the meditation hall, a path to the well, a path to the temple gate. Each sweeping motion was deliberate and graceful, transforming the scene of loss into something unexpectedly beautiful. The paths he created made the courtyard appear to be an intentional garden of gold, more magnificent in its own way than it had been before the storm. He worked with what was present, not against it. The young monk watched in growing wonder. He realized his teacher had not been fighting the falling leaves at all. He had simply been tending to each moment as it arose, whether that meant clearing a few scattered leaves or creating beauty from apparent devastation. Without a word, the young monk found another broom and joined his master in the work. The Buddha once said, "Do not believe in anything simply because you have heard it, but after observation and analysis, when you find anything agrees with reason and is conducive to the good and benefit of one and all, then accept it and live up to it." The heart of this lesson lies in understanding the difference between futile resistance and skillful response. Why do we so often mistake meaningful action for futile effort? Zen Buddhism reveals that our minds habitually categorize activities based on their immediate, visible results. We want our efforts to produce permanent change, to solve problems once and for all. When we cannot achieve lasting control over our circumstances, we may conclude that action itself is pointless. But this perspective misses the deeper purpose of engaged practice. The abbot's sweeping was never about defeating the falling leaves or maintaining a perfectly clean courtyard. It was about cultivating presence, care, and responsiveness to whatever each moment required. Each sweep of the broom was both complete in itself and part of an ongoing practice of attention. Consider how often in your daily life you encounter similar situations. You organize your home, knowing it will become cluttered again. You exercise your body, knowing you must continue exercising to maintain health. You listen to a troubled friend, knowing their difficulties may not disappear. You practice patience with a difficult colleague, knowing they may test that patience again tomorrow. The mind that seeks permanent solutions labels these activities as futile. The wisdom mind recognizes them as expressions of our fundamental nature to care, to participate, to respond with skill and compassion to life as it unfolds. Zen teacher Suzuki Roshi taught, "Each of you is perfect the way you are, and you can use a little improvement." This apparent paradox illuminates the abbot's wisdom. We engage with life not because we are inadequate or because the world requires fixing, but because engagement itself is the natural expression of awakened presence. The storm that stripped the ginkgo tree represents the unavoidable disruptions in our lives: loss, illness, disappointment, change. These forces will scatter our carefully arranged circumstances despite our best efforts. The question is not how to prevent such storms, but how to work skillfully with their aftermath. When we approach our daily activities with the abbot's spirit, even routine tasks become opportunities for mindfulness practice. Washing dishes becomes a meditation on presence. Listening to others becomes a practice of compassion. Organizing our workspace becomes an exercise in caring attention. The Buddha taught, "Better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace." Sometimes that word is expressed not through speech, but through the simple, caring action we take in each moment. The broom moving across fallen leaves, the hand that tidies, the attention that listens, the effort that continues despite impermanence. Tonight, as you consider tomorrow's responsibilities, can you approach them with the abbot's understanding? Rather than measuring their worth by permanent results, can you see them as opportunities to practice presence and care? Each small action, engaged with full attention, becomes part of the pathways we sweep through the golden leaves of our days. As the Buddha said, thousands of candles can be lighted from a single candle, and the life of the candle will not be shortened. Happiness never decreases by being shared. In the simple act of sweeping, the abbot shared the profound happiness that comes from meeting each moment with wisdom and grace. Let us continue on our journey to a riverbank, where an elder seeks the stillness that seems to elude him. A deeply religious village elder made the difficult climb to Master Gassan's mountain temple, carrying with him years of frustrated spiritual longing. His face bore the weariness of one who had struggled long with his own mind. "Master," he said, bowing before the serene teacher, "I am growing old, and I wish to dedicate my remaining years to meditation. Yet when I sit in silence, my mind becomes a raging torrent. Memories flood through me. Worries about my family multiply. Plans and regrets and foolish thoughts cascade endlessly. I try to push them away with force, but they return twice as strong. How can I find the peace you speak of? How can I quiet this chaos within?" Gassan listened with the patient attention of still water receiving rain. When the elder's words had settled into silence, the master rose from his cushion. "Honored elder," he said gently, "please walk with me." Gassan led his visitor out of the temple and down a winding mountain path lined with pine trees. The afternoon air carried the fresh scent of mountain streams and the distant sound of flowing water. They walked in comfortable silence until they reached the banks of a clear river that bubbled and danced over smooth stones worn by countless years of current. "Please," Gassan said, gesturing toward the flowing water, "look carefully at this river." The elder observed the constant movement, the way sunlight caught the surface, the gentle sound of water finding its way around rocks and fallen branches. "Tell me," Gassan continued, "could you, using only your hands, stop this river from flowing?" The elder looked puzzled. "Of course not, master. Such a thing would be impossible. The current is far too strong." "And if you were determined to try," Gassan persisted gently, "what would happen?" The elder considered this. "I would thrash about uselessly. I would create great disturbance and splash, frightening the fish and muddying the clear water, but still, the river would continue to flow." Gassan nodded approvingly. He pointed again to the moving water. "Your mind is like this river. Thoughts flow through it constantly. Some thoughts are clear like this mountain water. Others are murky like runoff after storms. Some move quickly over shallow places, others slowly through deep pools. But always, always, they flow." The master's voice took on the rhythm of the water itself. "Do not try to stop this river of mind. Do not jump in to wrestle with each thought as it passes. Do not attempt to build dams or change its course. Instead, learn to sit on the bank. Become the witness who watches from stillness." The elder felt something shift in his understanding. The anxiety about his racing thoughts began to soften. From the riverbank, Gassan continued, "You can observe each thought as it arises and passes away. Notice them without judgment. The worried thoughts about tomorrow's weather, the memory of your daughter's laughter 30 years ago, the plan for next week's market visit. They are not you. They are simply the natural flow of consciousness. Let them come. Let them be seen. Let them go." The two men stood together in the dappled sunlight, watching the eternal dance of water over stone. The elder noticed that his breathing had naturally slowed to match the rhythm of the stream. "The stillness you seek," Gassan said softly, "is not found in stopping the river. It is found in your capacity to observe its flow with perfect equanimity. You are the aware presence from which thoughts arise and to which they return. That presence is always still, even when thoughts are most turbulent. Buddha's wisdom reminds us, peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. What emerges from this story is the profound misunderstanding that causes so much suffering in spiritual practice. We imagine that enlightenment means achieving a mind empty of thoughts, a consciousness as blank and still as a stagnant pond. Why do we struggle so intensely with the natural activity of our minds? Zen Buddhism points to our mistaken identification with thoughts themselves, rather than recognizing our true nature as the awareness in which thoughts appear. We become like someone who identifies completely with the river, feeling personally responsible for every ripple and current, rather than recognizing ourselves as the spacious sky that holds all weather. This misidentification creates what Buddhist psychology calls the second arrow of suffering. The first arrow is the natural arising of thoughts and emotions. This happens automatically and is not a problem. The second arrow is our resistance to these natural phenomena, our belief that their presence indicates spiritual failure. Consider your own meditation experience. How often does the mind's commentary include judgments like, "I'm terrible at this," "I can't concentrate," or "I should be more peaceful by now"? Each of these thoughts is like trying to dam the river with our bare hands. The effort creates disturbance while accomplishing nothing. Zen Master Dogen taught, to study the way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. When we truly study the mechanism of thinking, we discover that thoughts have no solid, permanent existence. They arise from emptiness and dissolve back into emptiness, like waves temporarily forming on the ocean's surface. The practice Gassen demonstrates is called just watching, or pure witnessing. It requires no special technique, no mantra, no visualization. We simply rest in our natural capacity for awareness and observe whatever presents itself. This is not passive observation, but alert, interested attention, like watching clouds form and dissolve across a vast sky. The Buddha said, "The mind is everything, what you think you become." But this teaching includes a subtle point often missed. We don't become the content of our thoughts. We become identified with the process of thinking itself. When we shift from being caught in the river to observing from the bank, we discover our true nature as the unchanging awareness that witnesses all changing phenomena. This practice transforms our relationship not only to thoughts, but to all experiences. Emotions arise and pass like weather systems. Physical sensations flow and change like the river's currents. Even intense experiences of joy or sorrow are seen as temporary visitors rather than permanent residents. The river practice offers immediate relief because it works with our mind's natural functioning rather than against it. Instead of creating more tension through resistance, we learn to relax into our essential nature as conscious presence. From this vantage point, even chaotic thoughts become interesting rather than threatening. Tonight, as thoughts about today's events or tomorrow's responsibilities flow through your awareness, can you remember the riverbank? Can you find the still point within yourself from which you can observe the mind's natural activity with curiosity and kindness? As the Buddha taught, do not overrate what you have received, nor envy others. He who envies others does not obtain peace of mind. The peace we seek is not something to be acquired or achieved. It is our natural state, temporarily obscured by our struggle with the river's flow. Now, let us turn to a tale about sacred work in the most ordinary of places. In the kitchens of Tokujo's monastery, before he became known throughout the land as a great Zen master, Seppo Gison performed the humble duties of head cook. Each day before dawn, he would rise to prepare meals for dozens of monks. His responsibilities included managing precious supplies during lean seasons, cooking simple but nourishing food, and maintaining the cleanliness of the kitchen. The work was demanding and repetitive. There were large iron pots to stir, vegetables to chop, fires to tend, and endless cleaning. Many monks viewed kitchen duty as an obstacle to their real spiritual practice, something to endure before returning to meditation and study. But Seppo approached each task with complete presence and care. One morning, Master Tokujo entered the kitchen while Seppo was stirring a large pot of rice porridge for the community's breakfast. The wooden spatula moved rhythmically through the thick grain, and steam rose in fragrant clouds. Seppo's entire being was focused on this simple action, ensuring the rice cooked evenly and did not stick to the pot's bottom. Tokujo observed quietly for several moments, noting the quality of attention his student brought to this humble work. Then he moved closer and posed an unexpected question. "Tell me, Seppo," he asked in a low voice, "what is it that you are stirring?" Without breaking rhythm, without looking up from his work, Seppo replied, "The great ocean of Dharma, Master." Tokujo leaned closer. "And what is it that you hold in your hands?" Seppo lifted the rice-covered wooden spatula slightly, presenting it with the same reverence he might show a precious ceremonial object. "The dragon that stirs the depths." Master Tokujo nodded once, a flash of deep recognition passing between teacher and student. He understood that Seppo had discovered something profound about the nature of practice. No words were needed. The master quietly left the kitchen. Years passed. Seppo eventually left the monastery to teach, and his wisdom became renowned throughout the region. Students gathered from distant provinces to learn from him. One day, an earnest young monk asked the question that many had wondered about. "Master Seppo, how did you attain enlightenment? Was it through years of intensive meditation, through studying the ancient texts, through receiving a special transmission from your teacher?" Seppo sat in silence for a long time, his eyes soft and distant, as if remembering something precious. Finally, he spoke. "My entire life has been just this, stirring rice." The monk looked confused, expecting a more elaborate explanation about advanced practices and mystical experiences. Seppo continued gently, "I never found the path separate from the pot. The great ocean was never separate from the porridge. The profound truth was not hidden somewhere else, waiting to be discovered by abandoning my daily work. It was revealed by fully realizing what that work truly was." As the Buddha observed, there is no path to happiness. Happiness is the path. This ancient wisdom illuminates the fundamental error in how we approach spiritual development. We imagine that awakening requires escaping our ordinary responsibilities to find some elevated realm of pure spirituality. Why do we create such artificial separation between sacred and mundane activities? Zen Buddhism reveals that this division exists only in our conceptual thinking, not in reality itself. Every moment offers complete access to the same consciousness, that we seek in meditation halls and temples. The pot of rice porridge is as sacred as any altar. Our conditioning teaches us to value extraordinary experiences over ordinary ones, dramatic insights over simple presence, special states over natural being. This creates what Zen calls spiritual materialism, where we treat enlightenment as another acquisition to pursue rather than recognizing our inherent wholeness. Look at your own daily activities. How often do you rush through routine tasks while waiting for life to become meaningful? Washing dishes while thinking about meditation, commuting while planning evening relaxation, doing laundry while anticipating weekend adventures. This mental habit splits our experience into sacred time and mundane time, creating a false hierarchy that separates us from the fullness of each moment. Seppo's realization demonstrates what Zen masters call ordinary mind is the way. The consciousness that stirs rice porridge is identical to the consciousness that experiences profound samadhi. The attention that tends kitchen fires is the same awareness that perceives the interconnectedness of all beings. Nothing needs to be added to our ordinary activities to make them spiritual practice. The dragon metaphor points to something subtle and important. In Asian spiritual traditions, dragons represent the dynamic wisdom that moves through all manifestations. When Seppo calls his spatula the dragon that stirs the depths, he recognizes ordinary objects as expressions of the same creative intelligence that moves stars across the sky and brings spring flowers into bloom. Zen teacher Yun Men said, "Every day is a good day." This doesn't mean every day brings pleasant experiences, but that every day offers equal opportunity for awakened presence. The day spent stirring rice porridge contains the same potential for realization as the day spent in deep meditation retreat. The Buddha taught, better than ruling over the entire earth is the first step on the path of liberation. That first step often comes not through exotic practices, but through bringing complete attention to whatever we are actually doing. Making coffee becomes tea ceremony. Folding clothes becomes mindfulness practice. Listening to a colleague becomes communion with universal consciousness. This understanding transforms our approach to spiritual development, from seeking special experiences to recognizing the sacred nature of present experience. We stop postponing awakening until we have more time, better circumstances, or advanced meditation skills. Instead, we discover that the path unfolds beneath our feet, wherever we stand. Dogen Zenji taught, practice and enlightenment are one. The stirring of rice is simultaneously the method and the goal. There is no gap between the means and the end, no distance between the path and the destination. Each mindful action becomes both cultivation and fruition. Consider how this applies to your own work, whether you spend your days caring for children, analyzing data, serving customers, or managing projects. What would change if you approach these activities with Seppo's understanding? Not adding anything spiritual to them, but recognizing the spiritual nature already present within them. The great ocean of Dharma that Seppo perceived in his rice pot refers to the boundless field of awareness in which all experiences arise. Every sensation, every thought, every interaction emerges from this infinite space and dissolves back into it. When we recognize this, the kitchen becomes a temple, the spatula becomes a sacred implement, and the one who stirs becomes both student and teacher. Tonight, as you move through your evening routine, can you sense the dragon stirring the depths? Can you feel the great ocean of awareness in which your simplest actions unfold? Perhaps brushing your teeth becomes a ceremony of care, or setting out tomorrow's clothes becomes an act of loving preparation. As the Buddha said, if you want to know your past, look at your present life. If you want to know your future, look at your present actions. In each moment of complete presence, we touch the timeless reality that Seppo discovered in his pot of rice. Our next story reveals the subtle difference between experiencing and claiming experience. Master Fajin was walking the mountain paths with one of his most senior students, a monk who had practiced diligently for many years and possessed considerable learning in Buddhist philosophy. The morning air carried the crisp freshness of high altitude, and ancient pines swayed gently overhead. Their footsteps created a soft rhythm on the needle-covered trail. The forest held that particular quality of silence found only in deep wilderness, where human presence feels like a temporary visitation rather than dominion. Both men walked in comfortable quiet, each absorbed in the simple pleasure of movement through natural beauty. Suddenly, a warbler landed on a slender bamboo stalk beside the path. The small bird seemed unafraid of their presence, and without warning, it opened its throat and released the most exquisite song either man had ever heard. The notes cascaded through the valley with pure, liquid beauty. Each phrase seemed perfectly crafted, rising and falling with musical intelligence that no composer could match. The song lasted perhaps 30 seconds, though time seemed suspended while it continued. When the bird finished and flew away into the deeper forest, the silence that returned felt richer and more profound than before, as if the landscape itself had been transformed by what they had witnessed. The senior monk turned to his teacher with eyes bright with enthusiasm. "Master," he said, "what an extraordinary sermon that little bird just delivered. Its song spoke directly to the heart about impermanence and natural beauty. Even without words, it taught us about the fleeting nature of all precious moments. What a perfect demonstration of the Buddha's teaching, that wisdom appears in countless forms." Master Fajin regarded his student with the gentle, questioning expression that his disciples knew well. He allowed a moment of silence to settle between them before speaking. "Tell me," he asked softly, "who heard the sermon?" The monk opened his mouth to answer. "I did," but found himself pausing. Something in his teacher's tone suggested the question pointed toward deeper territory than it first appeared. He stood there, with his response suspended, sensing that his understanding was about to be challenged. The master waited patiently, allowing the question to work its way into his student's awareness. The forest continued its quiet breathing around them, indifferent to human concepts about sermons and teachings. Slowly, the monk began to see what his teacher was pointing toward. In the actual moment of listening, there had been no I separate from the sound. There had been no sermon distinct from the hearing. There had been no bird apart from the song. There had been only pure experiencing, seamless and undivided. The naming, the interpretation, the claiming of the experience as mine, the categorizing of it as a teaching. All of this had come afterward, when thought reasserted itself and began creating stories about what had happened. The monk bowed deeply, suddenly understanding the vast difference between direct experience and the elaborate commentary his mind had immediately constructed about that experience. Buddha's wisdom reminds us, do not believe in anything simply because you have heard it. But when you find anything that agrees with reason and is conducive to the good and benefit of one and all, then accept it and live up to it. The deeper teaching here shows us how quickly we move from pure experiencing to mental elaboration, missing the immediacy of life in favor of our stories about life. Why does the mind so quickly convert direct experience into conceptual interpretation? Zen Buddhism explains that the ego mind feels threatened by experiences where it cannot locate itself as the central reference point. In moments of pure listening, pure seeing, or pure presence, the sense of being a separate self temporarily dissolves. The mind's immediate response is to rebuild that sense of separation through naming, claiming, and interpreting. Notice this pattern in your own daily experience. You witness a beautiful sunset, and immediately thoughts arise. How magnificent! I should take a photo. This reminds me of that evening last summer. I'm so grateful to see this. What was initially pure, open awareness quickly becomes a personal experience owned by me, complete with associations, comparisons, and plans. The warbler's song represents any moment of natural beauty, spontaneous joy, or unexpected grace that arrives in our lives. These experiences are complete in themselves, requiring nothing from us except receptive presence. Yet almost immediately, we feel compelled to process them, understand them, and fit them into our narrative of personal spiritual development. Master Huangpo taught, "The foolish reject what they see, not what they think. The wise reject what they think, not what they see." The senior monk was rejecting his immediate experience in favor of his interpretation of that experience. He was preferring his thoughts about the bird's song to the song itself. This pattern extends far beyond aesthetic experiences. We hear a friend's words and immediately interpret their emotional undertones. We feel a physical sensation and immediately diagnose its meaning. We encounter a challenging situation and immediately strategize our response. Layer upon layer of mental activity obscures the primary experience. Zen practice cultivates what might be called first mind or don't know mind. This is the natural awareness that exists before the interpreting mind creates its elaborate constructions. It's not about suppressing thought or avoiding understanding, but about recognizing the difference between direct knowing and conceptual overlay. The question, "Who heard the sermon?" is not answered by providing a more sophisticated analysis of the no-self teaching. It's answered by returning to the pure fact of hearing itself. In that space, there is sound arising in awareness, but no hearer separate from heard, no experiencer separate from experience. The Buddha said, "Three things cannot be long hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth." The truth that Master Fajin revealed to his student cannot be found through more thinking about the experience, but only by returning to the immediacy of experience itself. This teaching has immediate practical applications. When you listen to music, can you notice the difference between pure listening and thinking about the music? When you see natural beauty, can you catch the moment when direct seeing becomes mental commentary? When someone speaks to you, can you distinguish between hearing their words and immediately preparing your response? Tonight, as sounds arise in your environment, perhaps distant traffic, settling house noises, or night birds, can you explore the territory Master Fajin pointed toward? What remains when there is hearing without a hearer, experiencing without an experiencer claiming ownership of the experience? As the Buddha taught, in hearing, there should be simply hearing. In seeing, simply seeing. In sensing, simply sensing. in knowing, simply knowing. This is the pathless path back to the immediacy that was never actually lost. Let us now turn to a story about recognizing the treasure that requires no seeking. A Buddhist priest from the Pure Land school, learned in complex rituals and devoted to elaborate practices, traveled far to challenge the renowned Zen master Bankei Yotaku. He arrived at Bankei's simple teaching hall where dozens of students sat in quiet attention. "Master," the priest announced in a voice loud enough for all to hear, "your teaching is incomplete and misleading. You speak of this unborn mind that supposedly exists in everyone naturally, but you offer no methods to attain it. You provide no ritual purification, no sacred prayers, no special techniques. My teacher instructed me in the proper way. By reciting the Buddha's name thousands of times daily, we cleanse our karma and secure rebirth in the Pure Land paradise. Your students are being deceived by promises of instant enlightenment without effort." The gathered students shifted uncomfortably at this direct challenge to their master's teachings. Some looked concerned that this learned priest might expose flaws in their practice they had missed. Bankei listened to the entire criticism with perfect equanimity, his face showing neither defensiveness nor irritation. When the priest finished his presentation, Bankei smiled warmly. "Reverend Sir," he said with genuine respect, "your devotion to practice is admirable. Please come closer so we might speak more intimately." The priest, somewhat surprised by this gentle response, stepped forward several paces. "A little closer, please," Bankei requested kindly. The priest moved closer still. "Now," said Bankei, leaning slightly to his right, "might you step to this side of me? I find it easier to speak when facing this direction." The priest, though puzzled by these requests, obliged and moved to Bankei's right side. "Thank you for your patience," Bankei said. "I notice there is a dog barking somewhere in the distance. Do you hear it?" The priest listened and indeed heard faint barking from the village below. "Yes, I hear it. And my voice now, speaking these words, you hear this clearly as well?" "Of course I do. What is the purpose of these obvious questions?" "You can see the faces of my students gathered here and feel the cool breeze coming through that open window." Yes, the priest said, growing impatient. "Any child could perceive these things. What does this have to do with spiritual attainment?" Bankei's smile deepened with infinite kindness. "Tell me, Reverend friend, when you heard that dog barking, did you need to recite prayers to accomplish that hearing? When you see these faces before you, do you need to perform purification rituals to make seeing possible? When you felt the breeze, did you first need to cleanse your karma through thousands of repetitions?" The priest began to answer, then stopped, sensing something significant in these simple questions. The capacity that just heard the dog, that sees perfectly, that feels and knows. Was this born when the dog began barking? Will it die when I stop speaking? Did you create it through spiritual practice? Can you destroy it through neglect? The priest stood in growing stillness, his argumentative energy quietly dissolving. "This natural awareness that effortlessly receives all experience," Bankei continued gently, "is what I point to as the unborn mind. It has been functioning perfectly within you your entire life. When you were an infant, it heard your mother's voice. When you studied scriptures as a young man, it comprehended meaning. when you traveled here today with concerns about incomplete teachings, it perceived every sight and sound along the way. The priest's eyes widened as understanding dawned. You have been trying to acquire what you have never been without, Bankai said softly. You have been seeking to purify what is already pure by nature. The treasure you hope to find in some future Pure Land is the very awareness through which you search for it. The visiting priest stood speechless, feeling the foundation of his effortful practice gently dissolving as he recognized the simple, undeniable truth of his own immediate experience. Ancient Buddhist wisdom tells us, if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. Here we discover the radical simplicity that dissolves our complicated seeking. We spend years pursuing what we have never been separate from, overlooking the obvious in favor of the exotic. Why do we find it so difficult to recognize our own fundamental nature? Zen Buddhism points to our deep conditioning that equates value with difficulty, authenticity with complexity, and spiritual attainment with elaborate effort. We cannot believe that what we seek most desperately is closer to us than our own breath. The mind that seeks enlightenment through accumulating spiritual experiences is like someone searching for their glasses while wearing them. The very capacity that searches is what we hope to find. The awareness that feels inadequate and incomplete is itself the unlimited consciousness we imagine lies at the end of some long spiritual journey. Consider your own spiritual seeking. How much energy goes into acquiring special states, collecting insights, perfecting techniques, or progressing through levels of attainment? What would remain if you stopped trying to improve your consciousness and simply recognized the consciousness that is already present? The priest's training emphasized transformation through repetition, purification through ritual, and salvation through accumulated merit. These practices rest on the assumption that our basic nature is flawed and requires extensive modification. Bankei's teaching reveals the opposite, that our essential nature is already perfect and requires only recognition, not improvement. This doesn't negate the value of spiritual practice, but radically reframes its purpose. Practice becomes appreciation rather than acquisition, polishing rather than creating, remembering rather than achieving. We sit in meditation not to attain enlightenment, but to rest in the awareness that is always already enlightened. Zen Master Linji taught, there is nothing special to do. Just be ordinary, relieve yourself, wash your face, put on your clothes, and eat your food. When tired, sleep. The extraordinary ordinariness of the unborn mind functions through every simple activity without requiring our cultivation or maintenance. The Buddha said, "Look within. You are the Buddha." This is not metaphorical encouragement, but literal description. The capacity that just read those words, that understands meaning, that experiences thoughts and sensations arising and passing, this is Buddha nature itself, complete and perfect, exactly as it is. When the priest heard the dog barking, no gap existed between hearer and heard. When he saw the students' faces, no separation existed between seer and seen. In these moments of natural functioning, the artificial divisions created by seeking mind dissolved into seamless experiencing. This recognition brings profound relief because it ends the exhausting project of self-improvement. We can stop trying to become worthy of love, enlightenment, or happiness. We can cease the endless effort to transform ourselves into someone more spiritual, more peaceful, or more wise. What we are in this moment, aware and present, is already the goal of all seeking. Tonight, as you notice thoughts appearing and disappearing in your awareness, can you recognize the unchanging space in which they arise? As sensations come and go in your body, can you feel the constant presence that witnesses their movement? This witnessing awareness is not something you possess. It is what you are. As the Buddha taught, you yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. This love begins with recognizing the sacred nature of your own immediate awareness, the unborn mind that Bankei revealed in his simple questions by the temple window. Let us continue on our journey with a tale of a master who discovered profound wisdom through childlike simplicity. This is the story of Great Fool, whose very name became his teaching. Yamamoto Yasuo lived as a prosperous scholar of ancient Japanese literature, respected for his expertise in classical poetry and his passionate devotion to traditional culture. Witnessing what he perceived as the decline of sacred values in his society, he wrote an impassioned book titled The Reality of the Gods, and ended his own life in protest, hoping to awaken others to what was being lost. He left behind substantial wealth and 5 children, 4 sons and 1 daughter, expecting his eldest son to inherit the family fortune and continue the family legacy. But the eldest son possessed a spirit that could not be contained by conventional expectations. The wealth, the social position, the scholarly reputation, none of these held any appeal for him. The young man looked at his inheritance and saw only golden chains that would bind him to a life his soul rejected. Without ceremony or explanation, he gave away everything his father had accumulated, changed his name to Great Fool, and set out to discover what lay beyond material security and social approval. At 22, this self-named fool began wandering in search of a true teacher. He had no money, no connections, no credentials, only a burning desire to understand the deepest truths of existence. After much searching, he found a Zen master who could guide him and threw himself into intensive study and practice. Within a few years of concentrated effort, he achieved the realization that had eluded him in his former life of comfort and learning. But instead of settling into the role of accomplished monk, Great Fool resumed his wandering. For more than 20 years, he traveled throughout the country, calling on various Zen masters to deepen and test his understanding. He sought not fame or position, but the continued polishing of his insight through contact with awakened beings. When he finally returned to his home province, Great Fool established himself in a humble hut. His appearance shocked those who remembered the wealthy young heir. He wore a robe made entirely of patches, survived on simple gruel, and owned only a single bowl which served every conceivable purpose. He used this one vessel for grinding bean paste, cooking his meager meals, and washing his hands and feet. To observers, he appeared to have lost everything of value. Yet Great Fool had discovered something precious that his former wealth could never have purchased. A love of pure genuineness that drew him irresistibly to children. Wherever he went, groups of children would gather around him for games of kickball and hide and seek. His delight in their company was infectious, and they responded to his presence with the natural trust that children reserve for those whose hearts are completely open. One day, during a game of hide and seek, Great Fool found his hiding place and closed his eyes, waiting to be discovered. But children being children, they eventually grew tired of the game and wandered home for dinner, completely forgetting about the monk hidden in their midst. Great Fool remained motionless in his hiding spot until nightfall, when a passerby discovered him and asked what he was doing. "I'm playing hide and seek with the children," Great Fool replied with perfect seriousness. "I'm waiting for someone to find me." The passerby explained that the children had gone home hours ago, but Great Fool showed no embarrassment at being left behind. He accepted this information with the same equanimity he brought to everything else, neither angry at the children for forgetting him, nor ashamed of his apparently foolish commitment to their game. When people asked why he spent so much time with children, Great Fool's answer was always the same. "I love their genuineness, their complete lack of falsehood." Despite his appearance of poverty and simplicity, Great Fool's calligraphy became famous throughout the region. Many wealthy patrons approached him with requests for his artistic work, offering substantial payments. But he had developed an uncanny ability to sense the motivation behind each request, accepting only when he felt the person's sincerity matched his own. Whenever children asked him to write something, anything, he would immediately take up his brush with joy, never refusing their requests regardless of how simple or seemingly meaningless. Great Fool often shared his philosophy with visitors. "There are 3 things I very much dislike: the poetry of poets, the writing of writers, and the cuisine of cooks." By this he meant that when people become overly conscious of their skills and sophisticated in their techniques, they often lose the natural spontaneity that makes their work truly alive. The Buddha understood that in the sky, there is no distinction of east and west. People create distinctions out of their own minds and then believe them to be true. What emerges from Great Fool's story is the profound teaching that wisdom often requires us to become foolish by the world's standards in order to rediscover what authenticity actually means. Why do we lose touch with our natural genuineness as we mature? Zen Buddhism points to the ways that social conditioning gradually teaches us to perform ourselves rather than simply being ourselves. We learn to say what others want to hear, to present images that gain approval, to suppress spontaneous responses that might seem inappropriate or unsophisticated. Great Fool's attraction to children reveals something essential about enlightened consciousness. Children haven't yet learned to edit their responses for social acceptability. They express joy when they feel joyful, curiosity when something interests them, and affection without calculation. This unfiltered authenticity represents not immaturity, but a kind of wisdom that most adults spend lifetimes trying to recover. The single bowl that served all purposes becomes a beautiful metaphor for the unified simplicity that emerges when we stop dividing life into separate compartments. When we drop the artificial distinctions between sacred and mundane, proper and improper, sophisticated and simple, we discover that one open heart can meet every situation with appropriate response. His willingness to remain hidden while the children forgot about him demonstrates what Zen calls great patience, the capacity to be fully present to whatever is happening without needing it to be different. Most adults would have felt foolish and emerged from hiding place, but Great Fool's commitment to the game was absolute. His patience wasn't passive, but actively loving, trusting that staying true to his word mattered more than avoiding awkwardness. Consider your own relationship to sophistication and social appropriateness. How much energy do you spend crafting responses that will create the right impression rather than simply expressing what's true for you? What would shift if you trusted that your genuine responses, however simple or unpolished, might actually touch others more deeply than your carefully constructed presentations. Zen master Ikkyu taught, "That stone Buddha deserves all the bird droppings it gets." This points to the same truth Great Fool embodied, that real spirituality isn't about maintaining a pure, elevated image, but about remaining genuinely present to life as it actually unfolds, messiness and all. Tonight, as you reflect on the day's interactions, can you sense where you were performing yourself versus simply being yourself? Can you feel the difference between responding from calculation and responding from the childlike genuineness that Great Fool never lost? As the Buddha taught, if we could see the miracle of a single flower clearly, our whole life would change. The miracle lies not in complexity, but in the simple, direct encounter with what's actually present, something children know naturally and adults must learn to remember. Now, let us explore a Zen story about the fluid nature of circumstances and the wisdom of withholding judgment. This is the tale of an old farmer and the art of living with uncertainty. In a remote valley surrounded by rolling mountains, an elderly farmer lives with his adult son in a simple farmhouse that has sheltered their family for generations. Their life is modest but sufficient, sustained by a small plot of vegetables and their most valuable possession, a strong, reliable horse that helps with all the heavy work of farming and transportation. One morning, the farmer awakens to discover that the horse has disappeared during the night. The gate stands open, and there are no tracks indicating theft. The animal has simply wandered off into the vast wilderness beyond their valley. For a farming family, losing their only horse represents a catastrophic setback that threatens their livelihood and survival. Word of this misfortune spreads quickly through their small community. By afternoon, neighbors begin arriving to express their sympathy and support. "Oh, how terrible this is for you," they exclaim with genuine concern. "What dreadful luck! How will you manage the farm without your horse? This is truly a disaster." The old farmer listens to their well-meaning condolences with calm attention, then responds simply, "How do you know this is bad luck?" His neighbors exchange puzzled glances. Surely the loss of such an essential animal is obviously unfortunate. But the old man's serene expression reveals no trace of the distress they expect to see. He continues with his daily activities as if nothing particularly significant has occurred. The next morning brings an extraordinary development. The missing horse returns, not alone, but followed by a small herd of wild horses, magnificent, powerful animals that have chosen to follow the domestic horse back to the farm. The farmer and his son quickly construct temporary fencing to contain this unexpected windfall. The same neighbors who had offered sympathy now rush over to share in the celebration. "What incredible good fortune," they declare with excitement. "You've gone from having one horse to owning an entire herd. This is the best luck anyone could imagine. You must be overjoyed by this blessing." Again, the old farmer listens thoughtfully to their enthusiastic congratulations before responding with the same calm curiosity. "How do you know this is good luck?" The following day, the farmer's son attempts to break one of the wild horses for riding. These animals, though beautiful, have never known human handling and resist fiercely. During the training session, the young man is thrown violently from the horse's back and suffers a severe break in his leg that leaves him unable to walk without assistance. Once more, the neighbors gather to offer their support in what appears to be another turn toward misfortune. "How dreadful," they lament, shaking their heads at this latest setback. "Just when things were looking so positive, this terrible accident happens. Your poor son. What bad luck has befallen your family again? The old farmer tends to his son's injury with gentle care while responding to their expressions of sympathy with familiar words. How do you know this is bad luck? Within days, their question finds an unexpected answer. Military officers arrive in the valley with orders to conscript all able-bodied young men for a dangerous war against northern invaders. Most of these soldiers will not return home alive. However, when they examine the farmer's son, his broken leg makes him unsuitable for military service. He remains safely at home while other families say goodbye to their children, perhaps forever. The Buddha taught, every blessing ignored becomes a curse. Every curse faced becomes a blessing. What emerges from this story is the profound wisdom of holding our judgments about circumstances lightly, recognizing that our perspective is always partial and temporary. Why do we rush to label experiences as fortunate or unfortunate when their ultimate meaning remains unknown? Buddhist psychology explains that our minds seek the comfort of quick categorization, preferring the illusion of understanding to the discomfort of uncertainty. We want to know immediately whether to celebrate or mourn, to relax or worry, to feel grateful or resentful. This mental habit of instant evaluation reflects a deeper pattern of trying to control our emotional responses by controlling our interpretations of events. If we can quickly determine that something is good or bad, we believe we know how to feel and what to expect. This provides temporary psychological relief, but often proves premature and misleading. The old farmer's repeated question, "How do you know?" points to what Buddhist philosophy calls "don't know mind." This isn't ignorance, but wisdom, the recognition that reality unfolds in ways too complex and interconnected for our limited perspective to fully comprehend. What appears devastating in the moment may prove beneficial over time, while apparent blessings may carry hidden difficulties. Consider how many experiences in your own life have changed meaning as their consequences became clear. Perhaps a job rejection led to a better opportunity. Maybe a relationship ending created space for personal growth. Possibly an illness brought unexpected insights about what truly matters. The disappointment you felt at the time now seems misplaced given what followed. This doesn't mean we should become emotionally numb or stop having natural responses to events. The farmer certainly wanted his horse back and felt concern for his son's injury, but he distinguished between acknowledging immediate circumstances and creating elaborate stories about their ultimate significance. Zen master Suzuki Roshi taught about beginner's mind, approaching each situation with fresh openness rather than predetermined assumptions about its meaning. When we practice this kind of mental flexibility, we become more resilient and responsive to changing conditions rather than rigid and reactive. The art of living that this story illustrates involves developing what Buddhists call equanimity, the capacity to remain present and responsive regardless of whether circumstances align with our preferences. This isn't passive resignation, but dynamic engagement without attachment to specific outcomes. Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron describes this as learning to stay with the experience instead of immediately jumping to conclusions about what it means for our future happiness or security. When we can rest in not knowing, we often discover that our wisdom about how to respond emerges naturally from the situation itself. The farmer's approach also demonstrates tremendous faith, not in specific outcomes, but in the fundamental trustworthiness of life's process. He acts skillfully with whatever arises while remaining open to possibilities beyond his current understanding. Tonight, as you reflect on recent events you've labeled as fortunate or unfortunate, can you hold those judgments more lightly Perhaps you'll discover that your peace of mind depends less on having good luck and more on developing the capacity to respond wisely to whatever unfolds. As the Buddha observed, everything changes. Nothing remains without change. This includes our interpretations of whether those changes serve our deepest welfare. As we continue our journey through the wisdom of Zen Buddhism, we encounter a teaching about the prerequisite for all learning. This story unfolds in the elegant receiving room of a great Zen master's monastery, where a young scholar arrives seeking wisdom. The afternoon light filters softly through rice paper screens as an earnest young man approaches the Zen master's dwelling. This seeker has spent years accumulating knowledge, studying philosophical texts, memorizing spiritual concepts, and debating religious ideas with other learned individuals. His mind brims with theories about enlightenment, quotes from sacred texts, and sophisticated interpretations of ancient teachings. He has come to request instruction in the ways of Zen, confident that his extensive preparation has made him ready for advanced teachings. The Zen master welcomes him warmly and invites him to sit on a simple cushion beside a low wooden table. Without speaking about Zen or enlightenment, the master begins preparing tea with graceful, deliberate movements. Each gesture carries a quality of complete attention as he arranges the ceramic cups, measures the tea leaves, and heats the water to the precise temperature. The young scholar watches somewhat impatiently, eager to discuss profound spiritual matters rather than observe this mundane tea preparation. Surely someone of his sophistication deserves more substantial instruction than watching an old man make tea. The master places an elegant cup before his guest and begins to pour the steaming tea with steady precision. The golden liquid fills the cup to its brim, but the master continues pouring. The tea overflows onto the saucer, then onto the table, and finally begins dripping onto the floor. Still, the master continues pouring. Unable to contain himself any longer, the young man exclaims, "Master, the cup is full! It cannot hold any more tea!" The Zen master sets down the teapot and looks directly into the scholar's eyes. "Indeed," he says quietly, "this cup is like your mind. It is already full. How can I teach you anything about Zen when there is no room in your understanding for new insights? First, empty your cup. Then we can begin." As the Buddha observed, an empty cup can be filled with fresh tea. What emerges from this story is the essential quality of beginner's mind, or shoshin in Japanese, that makes all genuine learning possible. Why do we struggle to maintain the openness that allows new understanding to enter our awareness? Buddhist psychology explains that our accumulated knowledge, opinions, and conceptual frameworks can become barriers to direct experience. When we approach any situation convinced we already know what it contains, we filter everything through our existing beliefs rather than meeting it freshly. This mental fullness operates much more subtly than obvious arrogance. We might consider ourselves humble while still carrying unconscious assumptions about how spiritual practice should unfold, what enlightenment should feel like, or how awakened people should behave. These preconceptions create a kind of spiritual static that interferes with clear perception. The Buddha said, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few." Shunryu Suzuki expanded this teaching, explaining that beginner's mind includes both the wonder that comes from not knowing and the courage to not know. This isn't ignorance, but wise innocence. The willingness to meet each moment without imposing yesterday's understanding upon it. Consider how your accumulated spiritual knowledge might sometimes interfere with direct experience. Perhaps you've read about mindfulness in ways that create expectations about what present moment awareness should feel like. Maybe you've heard descriptions of peace that prevent you from accepting the particular quality of calm available right now. Our concepts about enlightenment can become obstacles to recognizing the enlightenment that's already present. Zen Master Bankei taught his students about the unborn mind that exists before thoughts, concepts, and learned behaviors shape our perception. This original awareness doesn't need to be created through practice. It only needs to be recognized beneath the accumulation of mental content. But recognition requires the humility to not know, even about our most treasured insights. The practice of emptying our cup happens moment by moment. Each time we notice ourselves rushing to conclusions, defending positions, or filtering experience through familiar categories, we can pause and ask, what would I see if I didn't already know what this is? This beginner's mind applies not only to spiritual matters, but to every encounter with life. What would it mean to approach your partner as if meeting them for the first time? How might your work transform if you brought fresh curiosity to familiar tasks? What would become possible if you released your suppositions about your own limitations and capabilities? Tonight, as you rest in these moments before sleep, can you empty your cup of the day's accumulated judgments and interpretations? Perhaps you'll discover that not knowing creates space for a deeper kind of knowing to emerge, one that comes not from the mind but from the heart's direct recognition of truth. As the Buddha taught, the wise find pleasure in the truth. This truth reveals itself most clearly to minds humble enough to remain empty, ready to be filled with each moment's unique teaching. Let us now turn to a story about generosity in the face of poverty and the profound recognition of what truly cannot be stolen. This is the moon in the window. Master Ryokan lived in conditions of voluntary simplicity that would have challenged even the most committed ascetic. His small mountain hut contained virtually no possessions, no treasures, no valuable objects, no accumulations of any kind that might tempt a thief or provide security for the future. His few belongings consisted only of the most basic necessities: worn robes, simple eating utensils, and perhaps a book or two for contemplation. On this particular evening, as Master Ryokan rested peacefully in his humble dwelling, a sneak thief approached through the darkness, believing he had found an easy target in what appeared to be an unguarded dwelling. The thief moved carefully, avoiding any sounds that might alert the occupant to his presence, and managed to slip inside the hut undetected. Once inside, however, the burglar quickly discovered the reality of the master's lifestyle. He searched methodically through the small space, examining every corner and crevice where valuables might be hidden, but found absolutely nothing worth stealing. There were no coins, no jewelry, no fine fabrics, no tools of value, nothing that could be easily carried away and converted into money or traded for necessities. The thief stood in the middle of the sparse room, frustrated and disappointed by this complete lack of anything worth taking. He had risked detection and potential punishment for what appeared to be a completely fruitless endeavor. After investing time and effort in this nocturnal enterprise, he was faced with the prospect of returning home empty-handed, with nothing to show for his criminal efforts. Just as the discouraged thief was preparing to leave in defeat, Master Ryokan's voice emerged gently from the darkness. Rather than shouting for help or expressing anger at this intrusion into his privacy, the master spoke with the kind of compassionate concern he might show toward any guest who was experiencing difficulty. "Wait," the master called softly. "Don't leave yet." The thief froze, expecting to be confronted, accused, or perhaps threatened with consequences for his attempted burglary. Instead, he watched in amazement as Master Ryokan quietly rose from his sleeping area and began removing the old cotton-quilted bedclothes that provided his warmth during the cool mountain nights. Without a word of reproach or any indication that he considered this intrusion a violation, the master folded his bedding carefully and offered it to the bewildered thief. "Here," he said simply. "Take this. You've come all this way and deserve something for your trouble." The thief accepted the unexpected gift in stunned silence, unsure how to respond to such extraordinary generosity from someone he had intended to rob. This was unlike any encounter with a victim he had ever experienced. The master's kindness left him speechless and somehow ashamed of his original intentions. As the confused burglar departed with the master's bedding, Master Ryokan stood in his doorway and noticed that the moon had risen over the eastern mountains, casting its serene light across the landscape. The beauty of this sight inspired him to compose a traditional waka poem that captured both his physical situation and his spiritual understanding. Left untouched by the thief in his haste, the moon in the window. Buddha spoke of this when he said, "Thousands of candles can be lighted from a single candle, and the life of the candle will not be shortened. Happiness never decreases by being shared." This tale unveils a teaching about the difference between material wealth and true abundance, and the recognition that our deepest treasures cannot be taken by any external force. This ancient wisdom illuminates our relationship with possession, security, and the fear of loss that dominates so much of human experience. Master Ryokan's response to the thief reveals someone who understood that genuine wealth consists not in what we accumulate, but in our capacity for generosity, compassion, and appreciation of beauty that requires no ownership. The master's immediate impulse to give something to the disappointed thief demonstrates a revolutionary understanding of abundance. Rather than feeling victimized by someone who had tried to take from him, he experienced concern for someone who seemed to be in need. His poverty became a source of generosity rather than a reason for defensiveness or fear. Why do we typically respond to attempted theft with anger, outrage, and desire for punishment rather than compassion for the thief's desperation? This reaction stems from our identification with our possessions as extensions of ourselves, and our belief that being robbed somehow diminishes our worth or security. But Master Ryokan's response suggests a different relationship with material goods, one based on stewardship rather than attachment. His poem about the moon reveals the profound teaching at the heart of this story. The thief could take material objects, but could never steal the master's appreciation of beauty, his capacity for wonder, his ability to find joy in simple, natural phenomena. These internal treasures, peace, contentment, aesthetic sensitivity, remain completely beyond the reach of any external threat. The image of the moon in the window represents all the gifts that life offers freely to anyone with eyes to see them. Beauty, mystery, natural wonder, and the kind of wealth that increases rather than decreases when shared. The thief left with fabric that would eventually wear out, but the master retained access to beauty that would never diminish, and joy that no one could take away. This teaching reveals the difference between having and being. Material possessions require constant protection, can be lost or stolen, and often create more anxiety than genuine security. But the qualities of consciousness that Master Ryokan embodied, generosity, peace, appreciation, become stronger through expression rather than weaker through sharing. We can observe similar dynamics in our own relationship with loss and theft. When someone takes something from us, do we focus primarily on what we've lost, or on our capacity to respond with wisdom and compassion? Can we recognize opportunities to practice generosity even in situations that initially seem to call for defensive reactions? The story also points us toward understanding true security. Master Ryokan felt safe not because he had elaborate locks or security systems, but because he had nothing worth stealing in conventional terms and everything worth having in spiritual terms. His security came from inner abundance rather than external accumulation. Zen practice cultivates what might be called non-possessive appreciation, the ability to enjoy beauty and goodness without needing to own or control them. When we can appreciate the moon without needing to possess it, we access a form of wealth that no economic conditions can threaten. Additionally, our minds tend to assume that voluntary simplicity means deprivation or sacrifice. But Master Ryokan's story suggests the opposite, that reducing our attachment to material accumulation can actually increase our access to the forms of wealth that truly matter. His poverty became a gateway to generosity rather than a limitation on his capacity to give. The thief's hasty departure suggests that he recognized something in the master's response that challenged his entire framework for understanding value and security. Being met with kindness instead of anger, generosity instead of defensiveness, probably planted seeds that would continue growing long after he left the mountain hut. Beyond this, there emerges a teaching about the transformative power of unexpected responses. By meeting attempted theft with spontaneous giving, Master Ryokan created a moment of grace that had the potential to change not only the thief's immediate experience, but his entire understanding of human nature and the possibilities for positive interaction. Tonight, as you consider what you most fear losing and what you consider your greatest treasures, can you distinguish between the possessions that can be taken from you and the qualities of awareness that remain completely beyond any external threat? What would it mean to invest more energy in developing the kind of wealth that increases through sharing rather than decreases through loss? As the Buddha taught, in the end, just three things matter: how well we have lived, how well we have loved, how well we have learned to let go. The moon in the window represents the eternal treasures that remain available to anyone who has learned to let go of attachment while remaining open to the beauty and wonder that no thief can ever steal. Let us explore a story about the true nature of our emotional patterns. This is Temper. In a peaceful monastery where cherry blossoms drifted like snow across stone pathways, a troubled man approached the renowned Zen master Bankei. The visitor's face bore the weight of years of struggle, his shoulders tense with the burden he carried within. "Master," the man said, bowing deeply, "I have come seeking your wisdom because I suffer from a terrible affliction. I was born with an uncontrollable temper that erupts without warning. No matter how hard I try to suppress it, This rage emerges and destroys my relationships, my peace, and my happiness. I have tried everything: meditation, prayer, even avoiding people altogether, but nothing works. Can you help me overcome this curse I was born with? Bankai listened with gentle attention, observing not just the man's words, but the earnestness in his voice and the genuine desire for freedom from suffering. The master's eyes held a knowing compassion, as if he could see something the visitor could not. "What a fascinating thing you describe," Bankai replied with genuine curiosity. "This terrible temper you were born with, I would very much like to see it. In fact, if you can show it to me right now, I will cure it for you immediately." The man paused, confused by this unexpected request. He looked within himself, scanning his inner landscape for the familiar flames of anger. But in this moment, sitting before the wise teacher in the tranquil setting, he found only calm awareness. "Well, Master, I don't actually have the temper right now," he admitted. "It's not here at this moment. It only appears suddenly when certain things happen, when someone criticizes me, or when I'm frustrated, or when things don't go as planned." Bankai nodded slowly, a gentle smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Ah, I see. So this temper that you claim you were born with, it's not actually with you right now. It only appears under certain circumstances. If it were truly something you were born with, something that was your essential nature, wouldn't it be present all the time?" The man's eyes widened as understanding began to dawn. If his anger was truly innate, truly part of his fixed nature, it would never leave him. But here he sat, completely calm, the anger nowhere to be found. "In that case," Bankai continued softly, "this short temper is not something inherent in you at all. The Buddha once said, 'Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.' This ancient wisdom illuminates the profound truth that anger, like all emotions, is not a permanent fixture of our identity, but a temporary arising that we often mistake for our essential nature." Why do we convince ourselves that difficult emotions are just who we are? Zen Buddhism reveals several patterns that create this misunderstanding. When we repeatedly experience certain emotional reactions, we begin to identify with them so completely that we cannot imagine ourselves without them. We say, "I am an angry person," rather than, "Anger sometimes arises in my experience." This identification serves as a form of psychological protection. If we believe our reactivity is fixed and unchangeable, we avoid the responsibility and the freedom that comes with recognizing our capacity to respond differently. It feels safer to say, "This is just how I am," than to acknowledge the more empowering truth that we have choice in every moment. Consider how often throughout your day you might declare aspects of your experience as permanent fixtures of your identity. "I'm not a morning person. I'm terrible with technology. I'm just naturally anxious." Each of these statements reinforces the illusion that our patterns are immutable rather than simply habits that can be transformed through awareness and practice. Zen Master Suzuki Roshi taught, "Each of you is perfect the way you are, and you can use a little improvement." This paradox points to the truth that while our essential nature is already whole and complete, the patterns we've layered over that nature through conditioning can be examined and shifted. The man in our story discovered what meditation practitioners call the gap, the space between thoughts, the pause between reactions, where our true nature exists unmarked by temporary emotional weather. In that gap, He could see clearly that anger was not his identity, but simply a conditioned response that arose under certain circumstances. When we recognize that our difficult emotions are visitors rather than permanent residents, we can greet them differently. Instead of, "I am angry," we might observe, "Anger is arising." This subtle shift creates space for the emotion to be present without consuming our entire identity. Tonight, as you reflect on the patterns you might have labeled as just who you are, can you find the spaces where these patterns are absent? Can you locate the aware presence that remains constant, whether anger, sadness, or joy is present? As the Buddha taught, you are not your thoughts, you are not your emotions, you are the awareness that observes them. In recognizing this distinction, we discover the freedom that was always available beneath our conditioned responses. Let us now turn to a tale of profound simplicity and mysterious contentment. This is the stone robe. In the mountains near the great teacher Hakuin's temple lived a monk whose real name has been lost to history. The local villagers knew him only as the stone robe monk, a title that spoke to both his poverty and his ingenious adaptation to life's challenges. This solitary master owned virtually nothing. His hut contained no furniture, no decorations, no comforts of any kind. Most remarkably, he possessed no robe, an almost unthinkable condition for a Buddhist monk. Where other monks wore flowing robes that marked their status and provided warmth, the stone robe monk wrapped only his own skin against the elements. On the coldest mountain nights, when frost covered the ground and wind howled through the peaks, the monk had devised a unique solution. He would pick up a heavy stone and carry it around his small hut, walking in slow, deliberate circles until the effort of carrying the rock generated enough body heat to warm him. Round and round he would pace, the stone tight against his chest, his breath visible in the frigid air, until warmth spread through his limbs. The villagers who occasionally glimpsed him during these midnight walks were both puzzled and moved by the sight. Here was a man who had found a way to transform the very hardship of his poverty into a practice. The stone that others might see as a burden became his provider of comfort. The cold that might drive others to despair became an opportunity for simple, effective action. From time to time, the stone robe monk would visit Master Hakuin, appearing at the temple like a figure from another era. The two masters would sit together, sharing the wordless communication that flows between those who have touched the deepest truths. Then, as quietly as he had arrived, the stone robe monk would disappear back into the mountains. One day, he simply vanished entirely. No one knows where he went or how he died. But the stone he carried on those cold nights still sits in front of his abandoned hut, weathered by countless seasons, a silent testament to a life lived with extraordinary contentment in the face of extraordinary simplicity. The Buddha understood that health is the greatest gift, contentment the greatest wealth, faithfulness the best relationship. The deeper teaching here shows us that true wealth has nothing to do with material possession and everything to do with our relationship to whatever circumstances we find ourselves in. Why do we struggle to find contentment with simplicity? Our conditioning teaches us that comfort must come from external sources: warmer clothes, better shelter, more possessions, improved circumstances. The stone robe monk discovered something radically different. That resourcefulness born from acceptance can transform any limitation into workable wisdom. This tale unveils the profound difference between poverty of spirit and voluntary simplicity. Poverty of spirit involves feeling victimized by our circumstances, resentful of what we lack, constantly comparing our situation to others who have more. Voluntary simplicity, even when circumstances are difficult, involves a fundamental acceptance that finds creative ways to meet challenges without complaint or self-pity. The stone in this story represents what Zen calls skillful means, the creative adaptation that emerges when we stop arguing with reality and start working with it. Instead of lamenting his lack of a warm robe, the monk found another way to generate warmth. Instead of viewing the stone as an inconvenience, he recognized it as a resource. This is the genius of acceptance. It frees our creative energy from resistance and channeling it toward practical solutions. Consider the stones in your own life, the limitations, inconveniences, or challenges that you might habitually resist. What would shift if you approached these not as problems to be solved or obstacles to be overcome, but as raw materials for creative adaptation? How might a traffic jam become an opportunity for breathing practice, or a small living space become a chance to discover the freedom of owning less? Zen Master Dogen taught, to study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. The stone robe monk embodied this forgetting. He lived so fully present to what was needed in each moment that there was no energy left over for self-pity or comparison with others. His contentment arose not from having his needs met in conventional ways, but from the joy of meeting them creatively. The mystery of his disappearance adds another dimension to the teaching. Like all authentic spiritual presence, his impact was felt not through permanence, but through the quality of his being. He left no teachings, founded no school, attracted no permanent students. Yet the stone remains, inviting anyone who encounters it to contemplate the possibility of profound contentment within the simplest circumstances. Tonight, as you rest in whatever comfort or discomfort surrounds you, can you sense the stone robe monk's spirit? Can you feel the possibility of finding warmth not through acquiring more, but through fully embracing what is already present? As the Buddha taught, very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. The stone waits patiently to teach us that true wealth lies in our capacity to find creative contentment with whatever life provides. Our next story reveals the unexpected grace that can emerge from our deepest despair. This is the 11th hour. For many years, a sincere monk named Chosha made the long pilgrimage to study with the renowned Zen master Hakuin during his annual intensive meditation retreats. Each journey required days of walking through mountain passes, wearing out countless straw sandals on rocky paths. Each year, Chosha arrived with great hope and dedication, sitting in meditation for hours, studying the ancient texts, and participating fully in the rigorous schedule. Yet year after year, despite his earnest efforts and unwavering commitment, Chosha experienced no breakthrough, no flash of enlightenment, no profound realization. He watched other students have deep insights, while he remained trapped in the same patterns of thinking and confusion. The freedom that seemed so close to others felt impossibly distant to him. After yet another retreat had concluded with no progress, Master Hakuin called Chosha aside. The old teacher's voice was sharp with frustration. "You arrive here every year like a duck diving into cold water, making a great splash, but gaining nothing. You are wasting your time and mine. I cannot imagine how many straw sandals you have worn through making these pointless journeys. I have no use for such lazy effort. Do not come back." These harsh words struck Chosha like lightning. The one teacher he respected above all others had dismissed him as hopeless. Shame and determination warred in his heart as he walked away from the monastery. "Am I not a man?" he thought to himself. "If I cannot achieve realization this time, I will never return home alive. I will sit in meditation until either enlightenment comes or I die trying." Chosha found a small fishnet shed by the seashore, a humble shelter that reeked of salt and old rope. There he established himself in meditation posture, setting a limit of 7 days. For 7 days and nights, he sat without eating, without sleeping, without moving, except to maintain his upright posture. His body grew weak, and his mind hallucinated from exhaustion, but still no breakthrough came. On the 8th morning, Chosha realized he had failed even in this final effort. There was nothing left but to end his life. He could not face the humiliation of returning home without achievement, nor could he continue living with such spiritual poverty. Walking to the ocean's edge, he removed his sandals in the traditional manner of one preparing to die. As he stood in the waves, watching the sun rise over the horizon, something extraordinary happened. The shimmering surface of the ocean caught the morning light, creating patterns of crimson and gold that merged sea and sky into one radiance. In that moment, with death before him and all hope exhausted, Chosha suddenly became completely empty. In that emptiness, he was greatly awakened. Buddha's wisdom reminds us, sometimes you need to sit lonely on the floor in a quiet room in order to hear your own voice and not let it get drowned out by others. What emerges from Chosha's story is the profound truth that breakthrough often comes not through effort, but through the complete surrender that follows the exhaustion of all our strategies. Why do we struggle so intensely with achievement in spiritual practice? Zen Buddhism illuminates how our very desire for enlightenment can become the greatest obstacle to its realization. The mind that grasps for awakening is the same mind that prevents awakening. We approach spiritual practice with the same achievement-oriented mindset that serves us in worldly pursuits, not realizing that enlightenment cannot be earned, only discovered. Chosha's years of sincere but fruitless effort represent what Zen calls spiritual materialism, the subtle way we make even our spiritual practice about acquiring something, achieving a special state, or becoming a particular type of person. Each year he arrived at the retreat with expectations, comparing his progress to others, measuring his worth by his spiritual attainments. This very measuring created the barrier to the natural awareness that was already present. The fisherman's shed represents a crucial phase in many spiritual journeys, the dark night of the soul where all our familiar supports fall away. Here, stripped of the comfort of the monastery, the encouragement of fellow students, and the guidance of a teacher, Chosha faced his practice in complete isolation. Only when even this heroic effort failed did he reach the total surrender that spiritual awakening requires. Consider your own relationship to achievement in areas that matter deeply to you. Do you sometimes find that the harder you try to force a particular outcome, whether in relationships, creative work, or personal growth, the more elusive it becomes? This is because the grasping mind creates tension that interferes with the natural flow of insight and inspiration. Zen teacher Alan Watts observed, "The way up is down. You can't push the river." Chosha's awakening came not through one more day of meditation, but through the complete letting go that occurred when he faced his own death. In that moment of absolute surrender, the very awareness he had been seeking revealed itself as what he had always been. Tonight, as you rest in this moment, can you feel the relief that comes from temporarily setting aside all your spiritual and worldly ambitions? Can you taste the freedom that exists when you're not trying to become anyone or achieve anything? As the Buddha taught, when you realize there is nothing lacking, the whole world belongs to you. Sometimes we must reach the end of our rope to discover that what we sought was never missing. Now, let us explore a Zen story about flowing with natural forces and the profound wisdom of accommodation rather than resistance. This is the bamboo in the hut. Master Ryokan's mountain dwelling was as simple and humble as his lifestyle. A small hut, constructed with basic materials that provided adequate shelter without any pretense to permanence or grandeur. The structure reflected his philosophy of taking only what was necessary from the natural environment while remaining open to whatever changes the seasons and elements might bring. One spring, as the earth warmed and new life stirred throughout the mountain forests, something unexpected began happening beneath the wooden floorboards of the master's hut. Tiny bamboo shoots, following their ancient genetic programming to seek light and space for growth, started emerging from the soil below his living space. Most people, discovering this situation, would have immediately seen it as a problem requiring swift action. Bamboo is notorious for its vigorous growth and its ability to damage structures. Left unchecked, the shoots would certainly push up through the floorboards, creating holes and potentially compromising the integrity of the entire building. The conventional response would have been to cut away the bamboo before it could cause structural damage. But Master Ryokan saw the situation differently. Rather than viewing the emerging bamboo as an unwelcome intrusion or a threat to his shelter, he chose to work with the natural forces at play. Without hesitation, he began tearing up sections of his floorboards to create space for the bamboo shoots to grow freely toward the light they sought. As the weeks passed, the bamboo responded to his accommodation by growing with remarkable speed and vigor. The shoots rose higher and higher, soon reaching the ceiling of the small hut and pressing against the roof beams. Again, most people would have seen this as the point where drastic action became necessary. Either the bamboo had to be cut or the dwelling would be destroyed. Once again, Master Ryokan chose accommodation over resistance. He carefully removed sections of his roof to allow the bamboo to continue its upward growth, creating openings that let the shoots emerge into the open air above his living space. The bamboo responded by growing through the roof and continuing to reach toward the sky. The final result of this process was remarkable. Master Ryokan found himself living in a hut where living bamboo grew up through the floor and extended through the roof, creating a unique dwelling that was part human construction and part natural forest. Rather than seeing this as a compromised or damaged living situation, he embraced it as an enhancement that brought him into even more intimate contact with natural processes. Untroubled by what others might consider a highly irregular living arrangement, Master Ryokan simply continued his daily practices of meditation, study, and contemplation. He sat in zazen beneath the living bamboo that now shared his dwelling space, finding that their presence added a quality of natural aliveness and seasonal awareness that conventional architecture could never provide. The bamboo became his intimate companions, growing and changing with the seasons, rustling softly in the wind, and creating patterns of light and shadow that shifted throughout the day. What had begun as a potential problem had been transformed through his willingness to accommodate natural forces into an enhancement of his simple mountain life. As the Buddha observed, nothing is permanent except change. This teaching relates profoundly to our capacity for flowing with natural processes rather than rigidly defending our constructed plans and arrangements against the inevitable forces of growth and transformation. This ancient wisdom illuminates our typical approaches to unexpected changes in our carefully organized lives. Most of us invest tremendous energy in creating structures, physical, emotional, professional, social, that we then feel compelled to defend against any forces that might alter them. We treat change as disruption rather than opportunity, as problems to be solved rather than invitations to discover new possibilities. Master Ryokan's response to the bamboo demonstrates a radically different relationship with the unexpected. Rather than seeing the shoots as invasive problems threatening his security, he recognized them as natural expressions of life force seeking room to grow. His accommodation of their needs led to a living situation that was far more interesting and dynamic than his original static dwelling. Why do we typically resist natural processes of growth and change, even when they might lead to improvements in our circumstances? This resistance often stems from our attachment to predictability and our fear that any deviation from our plans will lead to chaos or loss of control. We prefer the security of familiar limitations to the uncertainty of organic development. The master's willingness to tear up his floorboards and modify his roof represents the kind of fundamental flexibility that authentic spiritual practice cultivates. Rather than defending his comfort zone against all modifications, he remained open to discovering what new forms of livability might emerge through cooperation with forces beyond his control. This story reveals the difference between accommodation and passive surrender. Ryokan wasn't simply accepting whatever happened without response. He was actively participating in creating solutions that honored both his need for shelter and the bamboo's need for growing space. His actions were both practical and deeply cooperative with natural processes. We can observe similar opportunities for creative accommodation in many areas of life. The parent whose carefully planned family routines are disrupted by a child's unexpected interests or needs. The business owner whose established procedures need modification to accommodate changing market conditions. The individual whose life plans are altered by unforeseen circumstances that could lead to entirely new possibilities. Zen practice cultivates what might be called adaptive wisdom, the ability to work creatively with whatever emerges, rather than rigidly defending predetermined structures against natural processes of change and growth. This requires a fundamental trust that flow and adaptation often lead to outcomes superior to our original fixed plans. The image of Master Ryokan meditating beneath living bamboo that grew through his dwelling represents a profound teaching about integration with natural rhythms. Instead of seeing his spiritual practice as something that required complete separation from natural processes, he discovered how accommodation of organic growth could enhance rather than compromise his contemplative life. This teaching also points us toward understanding the difference between problems and opportunities. The bamboo shoots initially appeared to threaten the master's shelter, but his willingness to work with them creatively transformed potential destruction into unusual enhancement. Our capacity to see challenges as invitations for creative response often determines whether difficulties become sources of growth or simply sources of stress. Additionally, our minds tend to assume that spiritual practice requires completely controlled environments free from unexpected intrusions. Master Ryokan's story suggests that authentic practice might actually be strengthened by learning to maintain inner peace while accommodating whatever natural forces emerge in our immediate environment. The story reveals how often our concepts of proper order and appropriate boundaries can blind us to possibilities for richer, more integrated ways of living. The master's hut, with bamboo growing through it, challenged conventional ideas about indoor and outdoor spaces, but created a unique form of dwelling that honored both human needs and natural processes. Beyond this, there emerges a teaching about the creativity that can emerge when we stop fighting against what wants to happen and instead ask how we might work with emerging forces to create something neither we nor they could have achieved independently. Tonight, as you consider areas of your life where unexpected changes or growth are challenging your established routines and structures, can you identify opportunities for creative accommodation rather than rigid resistance? What would it mean to tear up a few floorboards to make room for natural processes that might enhance rather than threaten your overall well-being? Buddha's wisdom reminds us, the wise find pleasure in water, virtue in mountains, and wisdom in forests. By learning to live in harmony with natural forces, rather than constant opposition to them, we discover forms of security and satisfaction that rigid control can never provide. The deep peace that comes from flowing with life, rather than constantly struggling against it. Our next story reveals the mysterious ways that true effort emerges when we release our preconceptions about purpose. This takes place in a mountain monastery in ancient China, where two devoted students named Puk and Muk serve their master with unwavering dedication. The morning sun streams through the monastery windows as the master calls his two students to him. In his weathered hands, he holds a simple wicker basket, its bamboo strips woven in traditional patterns, but clearly designed for carrying dry goods, not liquids. The master's eyes twinkle with what the students will later recognize as gentle mischief as he announces their task for the day. "I need water," the master says, extending the basket toward them. "Please go to the river and fetch some water with this wicker basket." Puk and Muk exchange puzzled glances, but bow respectfully. They have learned not to question their master's instructions, no matter how unusual they might seem. Together, they carry the basket down the winding path to the river, its waters rushing clear and cold from the mountain peaks above. Reaching the riverbank, they wade into the gentle current and dip the basket below the surface. As expected, the water immediately flows through the woven strips, leaving them empty-handed. Undeterred, they try again, this time attempting to move more quickly from river to shore. Still, every drop escapes before they can take even a few steps. For hours, they experiment with different techniques. They try covering the basket with their robes, moving in coordinated patterns, even attempting to carry it together. Each effort ends the same way, with empty hands and growing frustration, yet something keeps them trying. Perhaps it's their devotion to their master, or perhaps it's the puzzle itself that compels them to continue. Finally, as the sun begins its afternoon descent, they return to the monastery with heavy hearts and the same empty basket. "Master," Puk begins hesitantly, "we have tried everything, but the basket simply will not hold water." The master takes the basket from their hands and examines it carefully, running his fingers along the bamboo strips. A smile spreads across his face as he says, "Ah, wonderful. The basket has never been this clean. If I had simply asked you to clean it, you would have given it a quick rinse. But motivated by the challenge of carrying water, you have scrubbed every surface, forced water through every crevice, and polished it to perfection." Buddha's wisdom reminds us, happiness does not depend on what you have or who you are. It solely relies on what you think. This tale unveils the profound difference between going through motions and genuine engagement with our tasks. Why do we struggle to bring our full attention to mundane activities? Zen teachings illuminate how our ego creates hierarchies of importance, labeling some tasks as worthy of our best effort and others as mere drudgery to be completed as quickly as possible. We save our enthusiasm for activities that promise recognition, pleasure, or advancement, while treating necessary maintenance work as obstacles to more meaningful pursuits. Our minds constantly evaluate whether activities deserve our full presence. Cleaning becomes a chore when we focus solely on having clean spaces. Exercise becomes tedious when we think only of fitness goals. Cooking becomes rushed when we view it merely as fuel preparation. In each case, we rob ourselves of the intrinsic satisfaction available in skillful engagement with the task itself. The Buddha taught that right action emerges naturally when we bring wholehearted attention to whatever we're doing. Puk and Muk discovered this principle accidentally. Motivated by their desire to solve the master's puzzle, they transcended their usual approach to cleaning and brought creativity, persistence, and total engagement to their work. Master Linji taught, "There is nothing special to do, just be ordinary. Relieve yourself, wash your face, put on your clothes, and eat your food. When tired, sleep." This ordinariness points not to carelessness, but to bringing the same quality of presence to every activity. The sacred isn't found in special practices, but in meeting common tasks with uncommon attention. Consider how your relationship to household chores might transform if you approach them as spiritual practice. What if washing dishes became meditation on impermanence? What if organizing your living space became an exercise in mindful attention to detail? What if preparing meals became an offering of nourishment to yourself and others? The deeper pattern here reveals how indirect approaches often evoke our best efforts. When we focus directly on outcomes, we often become self-conscious and restrictive. When we focus on meeting challenges or serving others, our natural capabilities emerge more fully. Tonight, as you encounter tasks that your mind judges as unimportant, can you experiment with bringing the attention you'd give to something precious? Perhaps you'll discover that the quality of presence you bring to any activity determines its capacity to nourish your spirit. As the Buddha said, if you want to know your past life, look at your present condition. If you want to know your future, look at your present actions. Every mundane task is an opportunity to practice the presence that shapes both your character and your experience of aliveness. Let us continue our journey with a story about the limits of intellectual understanding and the humility that true wisdom requires. This is the ultimate point. A learned Zen priest named Tai Gu had spent years studying sacred texts, mastering meditation techniques, and developing a reputation for spiritual insight. When the position of abbot became available at a respected temple, the community chose him, confident in his wisdom and abilities. Tai Gu accepted the role with pride, believing his years of preparation had equipped him for spiritual leadership. Soon after his appointment, a woman from the village approached the temple, her face etched with the deep grief of a mother who had lost her child. She bowed before the new abbot, her eyes filled with desperate hope. "Venerable Master," she said, her voice breaking, "I have heard of your great wisdom and compassion. My child has died, and my heart is shattered. Please, tell me where my child has gone. I need to know, where is my beloved child now?" Taigu sat in silence, his mind racing through all the Buddhist teachings he had memorized about death, rebirth, and the nature of existence. He had studied the complex doctrines of different schools, could quote countless sutras about the bardos and the cycles of karma, and had meditated on the impermanence of all phenomena. Yet faced with this mother's raw anguish and simple question, he found himself utterly speechless. The philosophical concepts that had seemed so clear in scholarly discussion suddenly felt hollow and inadequate. The woman's grief was immediate and real, while his understanding remained theoretical and distant. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. How could he offer intellectual explanations to a heart torn apart by loss? The woman waited, her eyes searching his face for some comfort, some insight that might ease her unbearable pain. But Taigu remained silent, realizing with growing horror that despite all his study and supposed attainment, he had no authentic answer to offer her. Finally, the woman rose slowly, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She bowed once more and walked away, leaving Taigu alone with the weight of his inadequacy. Her footsteps echoed in the temple hall long after she had gone. That night, Taigu sat in deep contemplation, his certainty about his spiritual development crumbling. "I thought I had attained realization," he whispered to himself. "I believed I understood the deepest truths of existence. But this woman's simple question has revealed that I know nothing about the ultimate point. What use is being an abbot if I cannot offer genuine comfort to someone who is suffering?" By morning, Taigu had made his decision. He removed his ceremonial robes, abandoned his prestigious position, and departed the temple to deepen his understanding of true compassion. As the Buddha observed, the greatest prayer is patience. What emerges from this story is a profound truth about the difference between intellectual knowledge and wisdom born from direct experience. Spiritual understanding that cannot meet human suffering with authentic presence serves no one, least of all ourselves. Why do we sometimes mistake scholarly knowledge for genuine wisdom? Zen Buddhism reveals several ways our minds create this confusion. We can become intoxicated by conceptual understanding, collecting spiritual ideas like trophies, while our hearts remain untouched by their deeper meaning. This intellectual accumulation gives us a false sense of advancement while leaving us unprepared for life's most challenging moments. We also develop what might be called premature certainty, the belief that because we can articulate spiritual truths, we have integrated them fully. Like a person who has read extensively about swimming but never entered the water, we might know all the theory while lacking practical skill when it matters most. Additionally, spiritual positions and titles can insulate us from the very experiences that would deepen our understanding. When people treat us as wise, we might begin to believe our own reputation rather than continuing to cultivate genuine insight. The abbot's role placed Taigu in a position where others expected him to have answers, but this expectation prevented him from acknowledging his actual limitations. Consider how this pattern appears in modern spiritual communities. Teachers might offer complex, philosophical explanations for suffering while lacking the emotional availability to simply sit with someone in pain. Practitioners could master advanced meditation techniques while remaining impatient with family members. Students might accumulate spiritual concepts while their basic capacity for kindness remains undeveloped. The Zen master Yunmen taught, "If you walk, just walk. If you sit, just sit. But whatever you do, don't wobble." Taigu was wobbling between intellectual understanding and authentic realization. The grieving mother's question demanded presence, not philosophy. Compassion, not concepts. This doesn't diminish the value of spiritual study, but rather places it in proper perspective. Sacred texts and teachings serve as maps pointing toward direct experience, not substitutes for the journey itself. When we mistake the map for the territory, we become lost in abstraction while life's essential questions remain unanswered. The woman's question, "Where has my child gone?" cannot be answered adequately through doctrine or philosophy. It requires the kind of understanding that emerges only from confronting our own losses, sitting with our own grief, and developing the capacity to be present with suffering without needing to fix or explain it away. Taigu's decision to abandon his position demonstrates remarkable courage and authentic spiritual insight. Rather than defending his reputation or offering hollow comfort, he chose honesty about his limitations. This humility opened the door to genuine learning, while clinging to false certainty would have kept him trapped in spiritual pretense. The Buddha said, "Doubt everything, find your own light." True spiritual authority comes not from having all the answers, but from the willingness to remain present with life's deepest questions. Sometimes the most helpful response to someone's suffering is simply acknowledging that we don't know, but we're willing to sit with them in their pain. Tonight, as you reflect on your own spiritual understanding, can you distinguish between knowledge that lives in your head and wisdom that flows from your heart? Where might you be substituting concepts for genuine realization? What would it mean to approach life's ultimate questions with Taigu's hard-won humility? As the Buddha taught, it is better to conquer yourself than to win 1,000 battles. The conquest of false certainty opens the way to authentic wisdom. Let us continue on our journey with a story about the danger of spiritual expectations and the freedom found in ordinariness. This is the tale of a seeker who nearly missed enlightenment because he was looking for something extraordinary. In the garden of a modest Zen temple, morning sunlight filters through bamboo leaves as Master Bankei tends to his vegetables with the same careful attention he brings to meditation and teaching. His movements are unhurried and precise as he pulls weeds from around the young plants, his simple work clothes indistinguishable from those of any farmer or gardener. A man seeking spiritual instruction arrives at the temple gates, his eyes bright with the intensity of someone who has traveled far in search of wisdom. He has heard remarkable stories about Master Bankei's teachings and comes with great expectations of encountering someone obviously holy, perhaps surrounded by signs of spiritual power or emanating visible light. Seeing the gardener working among the vegetables, the seeker approaches and asks respectfully, "Excuse me, good sir, could you tell me where I might find the great Master Bankei? I have journeyed many days to receive his teachings." Bankei looks up from his work, soil still clinging to his hands, and smiles warmly. "Certainly," he says, gesturing toward the temple buildings. "If you go through that door there, you will find the master." The seeker bows his thanks and follows the indicated path, eager to finally meet the renowned teacher. Inside the temple, he discovers the same man he encountered in the garden, now seated in the master's traditional teaching position. The simple gardener and the great spiritual teacher are one and the same person. Confusion and indignation flare in the seeker's mind. This cannot be right. Great masters don't do common labor. Enlightened beings surely transcend mundane activities like weeding gardens. This ordinary-looking person cannot possibly be the extraordinary teacher he has sought. "Are you mocking me?" the seeker demands, his voice tight with offense. "Come down from that seat immediately. This is blasphemy. You show no respect for the true master. How dare you pretend to be someone so revered?" Master Bankei quietly rises from the teaching seat and settles himself on the floor with the same gentle awareness he had brought to his gardening. "Well," he says with unchanged kindness, "this has created quite a difficulty. Now you won't find a Zen master in the chair anymore. The Buddha understood that if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him." The heart of this lesson lies in recognizing that what we seek is often hidden by our expectations of how it should appear. Why do we struggle to recognize wisdom when it doesn't match our preconceptions? Buddhist psychology explains that our minds create elaborate images of how spiritual advancement should look. We expect enlightened people to be somehow separate from ordinary human experience, elevated above the mundane concerns that occupy our own lives. This spiritual materialism creates a dangerous divide between sacred and secular, special and ordinary, enlightened and unenlightened. We imagine that awakening transforms people into something other than human, rather than revealing the sacred nature of humanity itself. These expectations become barriers that prevent us from recognizing the very wisdom we claim to seek. The seeker's reaction reveals how deeply our conditioning shapes perception. Unable to reconcile his image of a great master with the reality of someone pulling weeds, he chose to reject the evidence of his senses rather than question his assumptions. His spiritual seeking had become so invested in finding something extraordinary that he couldn't accept the extraordinary nature of complete ordinariness. Master Bankei's response perfectly demonstrates the difference between being someone and being present. When challenged about his identity, he simply moved from the formal teaching position to sitting on the floor, showing that true authority doesn't depend on external arrangements, but on the quality of awareness brought to each moment. This points to what Zen calls nothing special. The recognition that enlightenment isn't an addition to our basic nature, but a subtraction of the illusions that obscure it. The gardener master wasn't playing roles. He was simply present with whatever activity life required, whether pulling weeds or offering teachings. Consider how often you might miss valuable guidance because it doesn't arrive in the expected package. Perhaps wisdom speaks through your child's innocent observation, your colleague's casual comment, or your own spontaneous insight during mundane activities. How many masters do we overlook because they appear too ordinary to take seriously? The Buddha taught, "Look within. You are the Buddha." This isn't metaphorical flattery, but practical instruction. The awakened nature we seek in others already exists within our own awareness, waiting to be recognized beneath our mental elaborations about what enlightenment should look like. Zen teacher Charlotte Joko Beck reminded her students that spiritual practice isn't about becoming someone special, but about being willing to be completely ordinary. We are not trying to have special experiences, she taught, but to realize the specialness of all experience when met with clear awareness. The greatest spiritual trap may be the belief that awakening will make us different from who we fundamentally are. This creates endless seeking for transformation rather than recognition of what's already present. True spirituality often looks remarkably like wholehearted engagement with ordinary life. Master Bankei's gardening wasn't separate from his spiritual realization, but an expression of it. Pulling weeds with complete attention is no less sacred than sitting in meditation. Teaching profound truths is no more enlightened than tending vegetables with care and presence. Tonight, as you notice your expectations about how wisdom should appear, can you remain open to recognizing it in unexpected forms? Perhaps the guidance you're seeking is already present in the most ordinary moments of your life, waiting only for the humility to receive it, without requirements about how it should look. As the Buddha said, 3 things cannot be long hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth. Sometimes the truth hides in plain sight, disguised as nothing special at all. Now, let us explore a Zen story about the traps we create through our own grasping. This teaching comes to us through the ancient wisdom of those who observed both human nature and the natural world with equal clarity. In the tropical forests of Southeast Asia, where coconut palms sway in the ocean breeze and monkeys chatter among the emerald canopy, local hunters developed an ingenious method for capturing these agile creatures. The technique required no violence, no speed, and no superior strength. Instead, it relied upon understanding a fundamental aspect of the monkey's nature that would become its undoing. The hunters would select a coconut and carefully hollow out its interior through a small opening, leaving just enough space for their trap. Into this hollow chamber, they would place a handful of sweet rice, its aroma irresistible to any hungry monkey. The opening was crafted with precise dimensions, large enough for a monkey's open hand to reach inside, but too small for a clenched fist to withdraw. When a curious monkey discovered this strange coconut attached to a tree, it would investigate by reaching inside for the rice. The moment its fingers closed around the grains, it became trapped, not by any external force, but by its own unwillingness to release what it had grasped. The monkey could have freed itself instantly, simply by opening its hand and letting go of the rice. But this solution seemed impossible from within its limited perspective. The hunters would find these monkeys sitting by their traps, sometimes for hours, pulling frantically at their trapped hands while refusing to release the very thing that held them captive. The rice that had promised nourishment became the source of their captivity. Their natural intelligence, so evident in other situations, seemed to abandon them when faced with the simple choice between holding on and letting go. What made this trap so effective wasn't its physical construction, but its psychological design. It transformed the monkey's own grasping nature into the mechanism of its capture. The stronger the monkey pulled, the more trapped it became. The tighter it gripped the rice, the more impossible escape appeared. The Buddha taught, "You only lose what you cling to." This profound teaching points directly to the monkey's predicament and our own. The story illuminates how our attachments, no matter how seemingly small or justified, can become the very prisons that limit our freedom. Why do we hold so tightly to things that ultimately constrain our movement through life? Buddhist psychology identifies this pattern as the root of much human suffering. Our minds, like the monkey's instincts, are conditioned to grasp what appears beneficial and hold on regardless of consequences. We close our mental fists around possessions, relationships, identities, opinions, and even spiritual experiences, believing that our security depends on our grip strength. This grasping operates across every dimension of human experience. We cling to past versions of ourselves that no longer serve our growth. We hold on to resentments that poison our present happiness. We grasp at relationships beyond their natural seasons. We clutch at achievements and possessions as if they could provide lasting security. We even grip our spiritual insights so tightly that they become obstacles to further awakening. The coconut trap reveals how what we think will nourish us can become what confines us. The rice represents all those things we convince ourselves we cannot live without. Perhaps it's a particular lifestyle, a specific role or identity, a certain level of comfort, or even an image of how our spiritual journey should unfold. Like the monkey, we often cannot see that our freedom lies in simply opening our hand. Master Huang Po taught, "Nothing is gained by addition, nothing is lost by subtraction." This points to the liberating truth that our essential nature cannot be enhanced by accumulating things or diminished by releasing them. The monkey's true nature isn't improved by possessing rice, yet its conditioning makes release feel like loss rather than relief. Consider the coconut traps in your own life. What are you gripping so tightly that it prevents you from moving freely? Perhaps it's a job that no longer brings joy, but provides familiar security. Maybe it's a grudge that feels justified but weighs down your heart. It could be an image of yourself that once served you but now constrains your evolution. The practice of letting go doesn't mean becoming passive or uncaring. It means holding our preferences lightly, like water cupped in open palms rather than ice gripped in closed fists. When we release our desperate grasp on outcomes, we often discover that what we truly need flows toward us more naturally. Zen teacher Alan Watts observed that we suffer most when we confuse our maps with the territory, our concepts about life with life itself. The monkey cannot eat the concept of rice, yet it sacrifices its freedom for the illusion of possession. Similarly, we often sacrifice our peace for mental objects that exist more in our imagination than in reality. Tonight, as you notice the various things your mind tells you that you cannot release, can you experiment with gently opening your hand? Perhaps you'll find that letting go doesn't mean losing what matters, but discovering what freedom feels like. As the Buddha reminded us, in the end, just three things matter: how well we have lived, how well we have loved, how well we have learned to let go. The coconut trap teaches us that sometimes the greatest strength lies in knowing when to open our grasp. Our next story reveals a profound teaching about the universality of loss and the path from isolation to understanding. This is the tale of a mother, her grief, and the Buddha's compassionate wisdom. In a small village where life moves according to ancient rhythms of birth, growth, harvest, and death, a young mother experiences the most devastating loss imaginable. Her child, barely old enough to walk and speak his first words, falls victim to a sudden illness that takes him before any remedy can be found. In a single night, her world transforms from the joy of nurturing new life to the incomprehensible reality of holding her son's lifeless body. Driven by desperation and the fierce love that refuses to accept finality, the mother wraps her child carefully and sets out for the place where the Buddha is known to teach. She has heard stories of his great compassion and miraculous wisdom. Surely, if anyone possesses the power to undo this terrible mistake of fate, it would be this enlightened being who understands the deepest mysteries of existence. She finds the Buddha seated beneath a great tree, surrounded by disciples and villagers who have come seeking guidance. Without ceremony, she approaches and gently places her deceased child at his feet. Her voice, hoarse with grief yet firm with determined hope, carries across the gathered assembly. "Please, Lord Buddha," she pleads, "bring my son back to life. He is everything I have in this world. Without him, my existence has no meaning. I know that your compassion is limitless and your power beyond ordinary understanding. Please, restore my child to me." The Buddha regards her with infinite tenderness, seeing not just her individual suffering, but the universal human condition that she represents. His response carries no trace of dismissal or false consolation, yet neither does it offer the miracle she seeks. "I will help you," he says gently, "but first you must do something for me. Go throughout your village and the surrounding communities. Bring me a single mustard seed, but it must come from a household where no one has ever died. When you return with such a seed, I will restore your son's life." Hope rekindled, the mother carefully lifts her child and begins her search with renewed energy. Mustard seeds are common, surely finding one should be simple. She approaches the first house she encounters, and the family immediately offers to help, reaching for their supply of seeds. "Wait," she stops them, remembering the Buddha's condition. "Has anyone in your household ever died?" The family exchanges glances filled with their own memories of loss. "Oh yes," they reply softly. "We lost our grandmother just 2 years ago, and before that, my brother died in an accident." Their faces show understanding as they realize why she asks, and they cannot provide what she seeks. House after house yields the same pattern. Each family gladly offers mustard seeds, but when she explains the requirement, each must acknowledge their own encounters with death. Parents speak of children lost to disease. Children remember grandparents who have passed. Some households carry recent grief, others older losses, but none have been untouched by mortality's reality. As the day progresses and her search expands to neighboring villages, the mother begins to see her situation from an expanding perspective. In every home, she finds not just willingness to help, but recognition of shared experience. Other mothers have held lifeless children. Other families have struggled with incomprehensible loss. Her agony, while intensely personal, is also universally human. By evening, she has not found a single household that death has never visited. But more importantly, she has found something else. The recognition that suffering, while painful, connects us to the fundamental condition of all living beings, rather than separating us from them. She returns to the Buddha, no longer carrying desperate demands for miraculous intervention, but seeking a different kind of help. Her son's body rests peacefully in her arms, but her relationship to his death has transformed. She bows deeply and says, "Lord Buddha, I understand now. Please teach me about the nature of life and death. Help me find a way to honor my love for my son while learning to live with this loss." Ancient Buddhist wisdom tells us, of all footprints, that of the elephant is supreme. Similarly, of all meditative themes, that on death is supreme. The deeper teaching here shows us that acknowledging the universality of loss can transform isolation into connection and despair into wisdom. Why do we feel so alone when confronted with death and loss, when these experiences are among the most universal aspects of human existence? Buddhist psychology reveals that suffering often compounds itself by creating the illusion that our pain is uniquely unbearable, that others couldn't possibly understand our particular anguish, that we've been singled out for especially cruel treatment by fate. This sense of isolation intensifies grief by cutting us off from the very connections that could provide healing. When we believe our suffering is unprecedented, we resist the comfort and wisdom available from others who have walked similar paths. We push away exactly what we most need: the recognition that love and loss are inseparable throughout human experience. The Buddha's compassionate strategy didn't minimize the mother's grief or rush her toward acceptance. Instead, he guided her toward a direct discovery that would transform her understanding organically. By requiring her to visit household after household, he ensured she would encounter the full spectrum of human loss, while also witnessing how families continue living meaningful lives despite experiencing tragedy. This search served as a form of healing meditation in action. Each conversation with bereaved families became an opportunity for the mother to see her experience reflected in others' stories. Each expression of sympathy from people who recognized her pain created threads of connection that began weaving her back into the fabric of community. The mustard seed itself carries symbolic significance. It's one of the smallest seeds, yet it grows into a substantial plant. This suggests that even tiny acknowledgements of our shared vulnerability can grow into profound understanding and acceptance. The impossible condition the Buddha set wasn't meant to frustrate her, but to lead her toward a different kind of miracle: the transformation of isolated suffering into connected wisdom. Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron writes about the wisdom of no escape, the recognition that attempting to avoid life's inevitable difficulties creates additional suffering beyond the original pain. The mother's initial request represented this very human desire to escape from loss rather than learn how to be with it skillfully. The story also reveals how grief can become a gateway to deeper understanding when met with wisdom rather than denial. The mother's love for her child didn't diminish through accepting his death. Instead, it found a way to honor their connection while acknowledging the temporary nature of all physical forms. In Tibetan Buddhism, there's a practice called taking and giving, where practitioners deliberately contemplate the suffering of others as a way of developing compassion and perspective. The mother's journey inadvertently became such a practice as she discovered that every family carried losses similar to her own. This doesn't mean that individual grief should be minimized or quickly moved through. The particularity of each loss, the specific person, relationship, dreams that have ended, deserves full acknowledgement. But recognizing the universality of loss can prevent grief from becoming a prison that isolates us from life's continuing flow. The Buddha's guidance points toward what might be called grief with company, rather than grief alone. When we understand that millions of parents have loved children who died, that loss is woven into the very structure of existence. Our pain becomes no less real, but somehow more bearable, because it's shared. This story also addresses the natural human tendency to bargain with reality, to seek exceptions to universal laws through spiritual intervention. The mother's request for resurrection reflects our deep resistance to accepting that some changes cannot be undone, that some losses cannot be reversed through sufficient faith, love, or spiritual authority. Instead of resurrection, the Buddha offered something potentially more valuable, a path toward wisdom that could transform her relationship to loss itself. This represents spiritual teaching at its most skillful, meeting people exactly where they are while guiding them toward deeper understanding. The teaching doesn't end with accepting death's inevitability, but points toward how this acceptance can become a foundation for more authentic living. When we truly integrate the reality of impermanence, our remaining time becomes more precious, our relationships more genuine, our priorities clearer. Tonight, as you reflect on the losses you've experienced or fear experiencing, can you sense the vast company of others who have walked similar paths? Perhaps you'll discover that your deepest pain, rather than separating you from others, connects you to the fundamental human experience of loving what cannot last forever. As the Buddha taught, of all things that arise and pass away, loving awareness alone remains constant. This awareness can hold both our love and our loss with equal tenderness. Let us explore a story that takes place in a tranquil temple nestled in the northern mountains of Japan, where autumn painted the world in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. This is the story of a garden and a Zen master. The crisp autumn air carries the sound of rustling leaves as a senior monk moves methodically through the temple courtyard. With careful precision, he gathers the fallen leaves beneath the ancient maple tree that has watched over this sacred space for centuries. Each sweep of his bamboo rake creates perfect lines in the gravel, and soon he has assembled a magnificent pile of leaves, their colors still vibrant despite their journey to the earth. The monk works with quiet satisfaction, placing the leaves carefully into woven baskets, his movements graceful and purposeful. From beyond the temple wall, another figure watches this scene unfold. A Zen master from a neighboring monastery observes the monk's diligent work, his weathered face thoughtful. When the senior monk notices his presence and waves proudly toward his immaculate garden, calling out cheerfully, "It is good, isn't it?" The Zen master simply nods and says, "Just about. Wait a moment, I'm coming over." The senior monk watches curiously as the Zen master enters through the wooden gate, walks directly to the ancient tree, and without ceremony gives its trunk a vigorous shake. Immediately, countless leaves cascade down like golden rain, covering the pristine garden once again in nature's beautiful disorder. The Zen master dusts off his hands and says simply, "Now it is good," before departing as quietly as he arrived. The Buddha once said, "Do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future, concentrate the mind on the present moment." This ancient wisdom illuminates a profound teaching about attachment to outcomes and the ego's need for completion. Why do we become so invested in finished results, in tidy conclusions, in maintaining the illusion of control over impermanence? Zen Buddhism reveals several patterns that trap us in outcome obsession. We often measure our worth by external achievements, rather than the quality of presence we bring to each action. The senior monk had moved from mindful raking to prideful display, from being present with the process to identifying with the product. Consider how often throughout your day you rush through activities simply to reach their completion. Washing dishes becomes about having clean dishes rather than the warm water on your hands. Exercise becomes about burning calories rather than feeling your body move. meditation becomes about achieving peace rather than witnessing whatever arises. In each case, we sacrifice the richness of the present moment for an imagined future satisfaction. Zen Master Dogen taught, "You are perfect as you are, and you could use a little improvement." This seeming paradox points to the delicate balance between accepting what is while remaining open to continuous becoming. The garden was perfect in its autumn disorder, and it was also perfect in its temporary tidiness. Both states were fleeting expressions of natural flow. The deeper teaching here shows us that true spiritual practice lies not in achieving permanent states, but in developing the capacity to engage wholeheartedly with whatever work is before us. Whether gathering leaves or watching them fall, the quality of our attention matters more than the condition of our garden. When we cling to outcomes, we miss the sacred nature of process itself. This ancient wisdom challenges our productivity-obsessed culture that values completion over presence. What if the purpose of raking leaves isn't to have a tidy garden, but to practice wholehearted engagement with impermanence? What if the point of any spiritual practice isn't to achieve enlightenment, but to show up fully for this unrepeatable moment? Tonight, as you notice your attachment to having things finished, organized, or resolved, can you pause and appreciate the beauty of incompletion? Perhaps you'll discover that the most profound satisfaction comes not from achieving perfect results, but from offering perfect attention to whatever is arising now. As the Buddha taught, the mind is everything. What you think, you become. When we think we must control outcomes, we become anxious controllers. When we trust the wisdom of process, we become participants in life's deeper rhythms. Let us continue our journey with a story about the transformative power of innocence and how genuine gratitude can emerge from the most unexpected circumstances. This is The Kind Ferryman. At a remote river crossing where the current ran swift and dangerous, there operated a notorious ferryman whose reputation for violence and lawlessness was known throughout the region. This outlaw had chosen his profession not from any desire to serve travelers, but because the isolated location provided perfect opportunities for robbery and worse. Travelers who needed to cross the water had no alternative but to trust themselves to his boat, making them vulnerable to whatever intentions he might harbor. The ferryman had heard of Master Ryokan's reputation for gentleness and complete absence of any capacity for violence or resistance. Unlike the merchants and officials who sometimes crossed his river, people who might be armed or who could pose some threat if provoked. This humble monk represented what appeared to be an easy and risk-free target for whatever mischief the boatman might have in mind. When Master Ryokan approached the river crossing, seeking safe passage to continue his spiritual journey, the ferryman agreed to take him aboard with the hidden intention of amusing himself at the monk's expense. He helped the master into his boat with false courtesy, concealing his malicious plans behind a facade of helpful service. Once they had moved away from the shore and were in the middle of the river, where the current was strongest and the master would be completely helpless, the ferryman began implementing his cruel entertainment. He started deliberately rocking the boat violently from side to side, creating dangerous instability that threatened to overturn the vessel entirely. The boat pitched wildly in the swift current, water splashing over the sides as the ferryman used his knowledge of the river and his physical strength to create maximum terror for his passenger. His intention was clear. He wanted to see this peaceful monk panic, beg for mercy, perhaps even break down in fear as he faced the prospect of drowning in the turbulent water. But Master Ryokan's response was not what the ferryman expected. Instead of crying out in fear or pleading for his life, the master simply endured the violent rocking with the same serene acceptance he brought to all of life's challenges. He neither struggled nor protested, showing no sign of the terror the ferryman had hoped to provoke. When the dangerous rocking failed to produce the desired reaction of panic and desperation, the ferryman escalated his assault. He deliberately tumbled Master Ryokan into the cold, swift-moving river, expecting to watch the monk struggle desperately in the water before being swept away by the strong current. But the master, though clearly not a strong swimmer, made no dramatic attempts to save himself through violent struggling against the river's power. His response to being thrown into the water was the same calm acceptance he had shown to the boat's rocking. He neither fought frantically against the current nor screamed for help, but simply allowed the water to carry him as it would. Watching this peaceful acceptance, the ferryman suddenly became alarmed. What had begun as cruel entertainment was transforming into something far more serious. The master was indeed in danger of drowning, and his complete lack of resistance or self-preservation instincts made his situation truly perilous rather than merely frightening. The ferryman's cruel amusement instantly transformed into genuine concern. Rushing to Master Ryokan's aid, he plucked the gentle monk from the water and pulled him safely back into the boat, using all his river skills to rescue someone he had just moments before been trying to terrify. Once the master was safely back in the vessel, dripping but unharmed, the ferryman expected anger, accusations, or at least some acknowledgement of the deliberate cruelty he had just inflicted. Instead, Master Ryokan looked at his rescuer with eyes full of sincere gratitude and profound appreciation. "Thank you," the master said with complete sincerity, bowing deeply to the bewildered ferryman. "Thank you for your act of selfless kindness in saving my life. Your compassion and quick action prevented me from drowning." The ferryman stood speechless, realizing that Master Ryokan genuinely believed he had been saved by a good Samaritan rather than rescued by his own tormentor. The master's innocence and gratitude were so complete that he saw only kindness where cruel intention had existed moments before. Buddha's wisdom tells us, hatred is never appeased by hatred in this world. By non-hatred alone is hatred appeased. This is a law eternal. The heart of this lesson lies in understanding how genuine innocence and gratitude can transform the very nature of our interactions, turning potential enemies into unexpected benefactors. This tale unveils something revolutionary about the power of perception to transform reality itself. Master Ryokan's complete innocence and genuine gratitude created a situation where the ferryman's malicious intentions became irrelevant compared to the actual outcome. A life-saving rescue that deserved acknowledgement regardless of the rescuer's original motivations. The master's response reveals a profound teaching about the difference between naive ignorance and conscious innocence. He wasn't simply unaware of the ferryman's cruel intentions. He chose to respond to what actually happened, being saved from drowning, rather than to the malicious motivations that had created the dangerous situation in the first place. Why do we typically focus on people's negative intentions rather than on whatever positive outcomes might emerge from their actions? This tendency reflects our investment in being right about others' badness, rather than our commitment to recognizing genuine opportunities for gratitude and connection. We often prefer being justified in our anger to finding reasons for appreciation. The ferryman's transformation from tormentor to rescuer demonstrates how quickly situations can shift when met with unexpected responses. His alarm at seeing the master in genuine danger revealed compassionate instincts that his cruel entertainment had temporarily suppressed. Master Ryokan's innocence created space for these better impulses to emerge naturally. This ancient wisdom illuminates our relationship with forgiveness and the power of choosing which aspects of complex situations to emphasize. The master could have focused on being deliberately thrown into the river, but instead he focused entirely on being pulled out of it. His choice of emphasis determined not only his own emotional state, but also the ferryman's understanding of who he was capable of being. The story reveals the difference between conditional and unconditional gratitude. Conditional gratitude depends on pure motivations and perfect circumstances. We're grateful only when people help us from completely altruistic intentions. But Master Ryokan demonstrated unconditional gratitude, appreciation for beneficial outcomes regardless of the complex motivations that might have preceded them. We can observe similar opportunities for transformative responses in many situations where people's mixed motivations create both harm and benefit. The co-worker who criticizes us publicly, but whose feedback actually helps us improve our performance. The family member who creates drama, but also provides genuine support during crises. The challenging relationship that causes pain, but also catalyzes important personal growth. This teaching also points us toward understanding the creative power of innocent interpretation. By seeing the ferryman as his rescuer rather than his tormentor, Master Ryokan offered him an identity upgrade that had the potential to influence all his future behavior. Sometimes, people become what we genuinely see them as being. Zen practice cultivates what might be called selective attention. Not denial of difficult realities, but conscious choice about which aspects of complex situations deserve our primary focus and response. When we can emphasize the helpful rather than the harmful, we often create conditions for more helpful behavior to continue emerging. The ferryman's speechlessness at receiving gratitude instead of accusations reveals how profoundly we can be affected by encountering responses that don't match our expectations. Master Ryokan's innocence created a moment of grace that challenged everything the outlaw thought he knew about how victims respond to perpetrators. Additionally, our minds tend to assume that spiritual practice should make us more discerning about others' negative motivations. But this story suggests that sometimes wisdom involves seeing through negative intentions to focus on positive outcomes and possibilities for genuine connection. This story also reveals the power of gratitude to transform our own experience of difficult situations. By choosing to focus on being rescued rather than on being attacked, Master Ryokan avoided the suffering that comes from dwelling on others' harmful intentions, while fully receiving the benefit of whatever help became available. Beyond this, there emerges a teaching about the courage required for sustained innocence in a world where cynicism and suspicion are often justified by experience. Master Ryokan's response required tremendous inner strength, not naivety, but the conscious choice to meet each moment with openness rather than defensive interpretation. Tonight, as you consider relationships or situations where people's mixed motivations have created both harm and benefit, can you experiment with Master Ryokan's selective focus on whatever helpful outcomes have emerged? What would it mean to express genuine gratitude for assistance received, regardless of the complex intentions that might have preceded it. As the Buddha taught, in the end, just three things matter: how well we have lived, how well we have loved, how well we have learned to let go. Through conscious innocence and genuine gratitude, we discover the capacity to transform potential enemies into unexpected sources of grace, creating possibilities for connection and growth that judgment and accusation can never provide. As these stories come to an end, notice the quiet feeling you have right now. This peace isn't something new or external. It's a feeling that was already inside you, and you've just made space for it to appear. It's always there for you, just beneath the surface of a busy life. The Buddha once said, "Even as a solid rock is unshaken by the wind, so are the wise unshaken by praise or blame." This simply means that, like a strong rock in the wind, we can learn to stay calm when things get difficult. The stories tonight were all about this. They gently reminded us that life gets easier when we let go of what we can't control. They showed that true peace comes when we stop worrying so much about what might happen. Even if you only half listened, these lessons are now with you. They are there to support you whenever you may need them. Now, as you get ready for sleep, let this calm feeling settle over you. Pay attention to your breath, how it moves in and out, slow and steady. Feel your body getting heavy and comfortable as it relaxes completely. You don't have to force this feeling. It is what happens naturally when you let go of the day's stress. You have given yourself this gift of quiet time, and now your mind and body can truly rest. The wisdom in these stories isn't a hidden secret. It's a simple truth that you can find any time, just by paying attention. Tonight you practiced being still and aware. As you drift off to sleep and wake up to a new day, try to carry this peaceful feeling with you. It will be there to help you through the good moments and the challenging ones, reminding you that you can always return to this quiet place within yourself. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us on this journey at Sleepy Monk.